San Andreas, 2015, is a large-scale disaster action film directed by Brad Peyton and starring Dwayne Johnson, Carla Gugino, Alexandra Daddario, Ioan Grufford, Archie Punjabi, and Paul Giamatti. The movie combines emotional family drama with massive earthquake destruction across California. At its center is a rescue story about a father trying to save his daughter while the entire West Coast collapses around them. The film imagines what could happen if the San Andreas Fault triggered the biggest earthquake in recorded history. Skyscrapers collapse, highways split apart, tsunamis destroy cities, and millions of people fight to survive. But beneath all the destruction is a personal story about family, regret, courage, and second chances. Opening rescue sequence. The movie begins in the mountains of California with a thrilling rescue operation. A young woman is driving along a dangerous cliffside road when loose rocks cause her car to crash through a guardrail. The vehicle hangs precariously over the edge of a steep canyon. The terrified woman calls emergency services while trapped inside the dangling car. At this moment, the audience is introduced to Raymond "Ray" Gaines, played by Dwayne Johnson. Ray works as a rescue helicopter pilot for the Los Angeles Fire Department Air Rescue Division. He is highly skilled, calm under pressure, and known for risking his own life to save others. Ray and his rescue team fly to the scene in a helicopter. Despite dangerous weather and unstable terrain, Ray performs an incredibly difficult rescue. Using ropes and precision flying, he lowers a rescuer down to the car while keeping the helicopter steady near the cliff face. The woman is eventually pulled to safety moments before the car falls into the canyon. This opening scene establishes several important things about Ray. He is fearless, experienced, and deeply committed to helping people. It also sets the tone for the film, showing that survival and rescue will be central themes. Ray's broken family. After the rescue, the story shifts to Ray's personal life. Although he is a hero at work, his family life is falling apart. Ray is separated from his wife Emma, played by Carla Gugino. They are preparing to finalize their divorce after years of emotional distance. Their relationship suffered greatly after the tragic death of their young daughter Mallory years earlier. The loss devastated both parents and slowly pushed them apart. Ray buried himself in work while Emma struggled emotionally. Neither fully recovered from the tragedy. Emma has now started a relationship with Daniel Riddick, a wealthy real estate developer. Daniel is successful, sophisticated, and financially powerful. Unlike Ray, he represents stability and luxury. Emma seems ready to move forward with her life, even though she still clearly cares about Ray. Meanwhile, Ray and Emma's surviving daughter, Blake Gaines, is preparing to leave for college. Blake is intelligent, adventurous, and emotionally close to her father. She is moving to San Francisco, which becomes very important later in the story. Although the family is fractured, there are hints that the emotional bond between them still exists beneath the pain and separation. Lawrence Hayes predicts disaster. At the California Institute of Technology, seismologist Dr. Lawrence Hayes, played by Paul Giamatti, and his colleague Dr. Kim Park are conducting experiments related to earthquake prediction. For decades, scientists have struggled to predict earthquakes accurately. Hayes believes he has finally discovered a breakthrough system capable of detecting pressure changes before major seismic activity occurs. While visiting Hoover Dam with Kim Park, they witness strange readings from the nearby fault lines. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake violently. A massive earthquake strikes the area without warning. The Hoover Dam begins collapsing as tourists and workers panic. Huge cracks form across the structure, concrete breaks apart, and entire sections crumble into the river below. Dr. Park sacrifices himself while helping Hayes escape. This scene is the first major disaster in the film and signals that something catastrophic is beginning beneath California. Hayes realizes that the quake near Hoover Dam may only be the start of a chain reaction along the San Andreas Fault. The earthquake hits Los Angeles. Back in Los Angeles, Ray is preparing to travel with Emma to finalize divorce papers. Their uncomfortable conversation reveals lingering emotions between them. Even though they are separated, there is unresolved love and sadness in their relationship. At the same time, Blake travels to San Francisco with Daniel's younger sister Susan. Daniel promises Blake he will join them later. Suddenly, the ground begins shaking violently in Los Angeles. Buildings sway, streets crack open, and chaos erupts across the city. A massive earthquake tears through downtown Los Angeles. One of the most dramatic sequences involves a skyscraper under construction. Emma is inside the building when the quake strikes. Windows explode, floors collapse, cranes swing wildly through the air, and the building begins to crumble. Ray immediately realizes Emma is trapped. Using a rescue helicopter, he flies directly into the collapsing city despite extreme danger. Dust clouds fill the air as skyscrapers fall around him. Emma narrowly survives multiple deadly situations inside the building. She is eventually trapped on the roof while debris crashes all around her. Ray arrives just in time, expertly maneuvering the helicopter between collapsing structures to rescue her. The sequence demonstrates both Ray's extraordinary abilities and the enduring emotional connection between him and Emma. Even after years apart, Ray risks everything without hesitation to save her. Once Emma is rescued, Ray and Emma realize that Blake is in San Francisco, directly in the path of the growing disaster. Communication systems are failing, roads are destroyed, and aftershocks continue across the state. Scientists predict an even larger earthquake is coming. Hayes appears on television warning that the San Andreas Fault is triggering unprecedented seismic activity. He estimates that California could soon experience the strongest earthquake in history. Ray decides he and Emma must travel north immediately to save Blake before it is too late. This journey becomes the emotional heart of the movie. The disaster forces Ray and Emma to confront both the destruction around them and the emotional wounds within their family. Meanwhile, Blake is stranded in San Francisco with Daniel's sister Susan and a young British man named Ben Taylor. Ben and his younger brother Ollie were visiting San Francisco when the earthquake struck. Ben works in England but dreams of becoming a writer. Unlike Daniel, Ben is kind, brave, and genuine. After the earthquake damages the city, Blake becomes separated from Susan. She meets Ben and Ollie while trapped inside a parking garage during violent tremors. The three escape together and begin navigating the increasingly dangerous city streets. Blake proves highly capable during the crisis. Earlier in the film, Ray taught her survival techniques, including first aid and emergency procedures. Those lessons now help save lives. She treats injuries, stays calm under pressure, and helps guide the group through collapsing streets and ruined buildings. As they travel through San Francisco, Ben and Blake grow closer emotionally. Their relationship develops naturally through shared danger and mutual trust. Daniel reveals his true nature. Daniel finally arrives in San Francisco intending to rescue Blake and Susan. However, his true personality emerges during the disaster. Instead of risking himself to help others, Daniel prioritizes his own survival. When another quake strikes, he panics and abandons Blake, Susan, Ben, and Ollie. He steals a vehicle and escapes alone, leaving the others in danger. This moment completely changes how the audience views him. Earlier he appeared confident and successful, but during real crisis he proves selfish and cowardly. In contrast, Ray repeatedly risks his own life for strangers and family alike. The film clearly contrasts material success with genuine courage and character. Daniel's abandonment also symbolizes Emma's realization that she chose the wrong future for herself. Traveling through a destroyed California. Ray and Emma continue traveling north through increasingly catastrophic conditions. Their helicopter eventually runs out of fuel, forcing them to land in a shopping mall. From there, they steal a small plane to continue the journey. As they fly over California, they witness horrifying destruction everywhere. Entire neighborhoods burn, highways are shattered, bridges collapse into the ocean, and massive fissures split the earth apart. The visual scale of destruction becomes enormous. The movie portrays California as nearly apocalyptic. Eventually, they crash-land the plane near a forest after another earthquake disrupts their flight path. Ray and Emma continue on foot and later use vehicles and boats to keep moving towards San Francisco. Throughout the journey, old emotions resurface between them. They talk honestly about the death of Mallory and how it destroyed their marriage. Emma admits that despite trying to move on, she never stopped loving Ray. Ray also acknowledges his emotional failures after their daughter's death. The disaster becomes a catalyst for healing. Facing death together reminds them what truly matters. The mega-earthquake. Dr. Hayes eventually determines that the earlier earthquakes were only foreshocks. A gigantic main quake is still building beneath the San Andreas Fault. Then it happens. The largest earthquake in recorded history strikes San Francisco. The sequence is the centerpiece of the movie. Buildings collapse across the skyline, roads twist apart, trains derail, and the earth itself appears to ripple through the city. The famous Trans-America Pyramid sways violently before surrounding structures collapse. Giant sinkholes swallow vehicles and people. Fire erupts throughout downtown areas. One especially intense scene involves a massive cargo ship being swept into the city after a tsunami forms in the bay. The earthquake is portrayed almost like a living monster tearing civilization apart. Dr. Hayes estimates the quake reaches magnitude 9.6 or higher, far beyond anything previously experienced. Tsunami destroys the bay. The giant earthquake triggers an enormous tsunami that rushes towards San Francisco Bay. Massive walls of water smash into the coastline, flooding streets and destroying buildings. Ships crash through the city as people desperately flee for higher ground. Blake, Ben, and Ollie barely survive as floodwaters sweep through the streets. Ray and Emma finally reach San Francisco by boat just as the tsunami arrives. Ray navigates dangerous waters filled with debris, collapsing structures, and overturned ships. The scale of destruction becomes almost unimaginable. Entire sections of the city disappear beneath water. Yet despite the chaos, Ray refuses to give up searching for Blake. Blake trapped beneath rubble. Blake, Ben, and Ollie eventually become trapped inside a partially collapsed building near the flooded waterfront. The structure is unstable and slowly filling with water. Escape routes are blocked by debris. Ray and Emma manage to locate them after hearing emergency radio signals. However, before they can fully rescue Blake, another powerful shockwave destabilizes the building. Blake becomes trapped underwater inside a submerged section of the structure. This creates one of the film's most emotional moments. Ray dives underwater through wreckage and debris to reach his daughter. Time is running out as Blake loses consciousness from lack of oxygen. Ray manages to pull her free, but she is not breathing when they reach the surface. The emotional climax. Emma desperately performs CPR while Ray watches helplessly. This moment mirrors the trauma of losing their daughter Mallory years earlier. Ray fears he is about to lose another child. For a few terrifying moments, Blake appears dead. Then she suddenly coughs and begins breathing again. The family embraces emotionally as relief overwhelms them. It is the emotional climax of the film. After surviving unimaginable destruction, the Gaines family is finally reunited. Ben and Ollie also survive, strengthening the hopeful tone of the ending. Rebuilding and hope. As the disaster finally subsides, survivors gather across the ruins of San Francisco. The American flag is raised above the destroyed city as rescue helicopters continue searching for survivors. Ray, Emma, and Blake stand together overlooking the devastation. Despite losing homes, cities, and countless lives, they have rediscovered their connection as a family. Emma tells Ray that they will rebuild together. The film ends on a hopeful note. Although California has been devastated physically, the emotional healing within the Gaines family suggests renewal and resilience. The true heart of San Andreas is not the earthquake itself but the story of a broken family finding each other again. Ray and Emma's marriage collapsed after personal tragedy, but the disaster forces them to confront unresolved emotions. Their journey becomes one of forgiveness, healing, and rediscovery. Blake also represents the emotional bridge between her parents. Saving her becomes symbolic of saving what remains of their family. 2. Human courage during catastrophe. Throughout the movie, ordinary people face impossible situations. Rescue workers, scientists, survivors, and civilians all struggle against overwhelming destruction. Some characters act heroically while others reveal selfishness and fear. Ray embodies selfless bravery. He repeatedly risks death to help others even when the odds are impossible. 3. Nature's power. The film constantly reminds viewers how small humans are compared to nature. Skyscrapers, highways, dams, and entire cities collapse within moments. Human technology and wealth become meaningless against earthquakes and tsunamis. This creates both terror and awe throughout the story. 4. Survival and hope. Even amid destruction, the movie emphasizes survival and resilience. Characters keep moving forward despite fear and loss. The ending suggests that although disasters can destroy buildings and cities, human relationships and hope can survive. Major characters explained. Ray Gaines. Ray is the emotional center of the film. He is brave, loyal, and highly skilled, but emotionally wounded by the death of his daughter and the collapse of his marriage. The disaster allows him to reconnect with Emma and Blake while rediscovering his purpose beyond rescue work. Emma gains. Emma initially appears ready to leave her past behind, but the catastrophe reveals that her emotional bond with Ray never disappeared. She becomes stronger and more determined as the story progresses. Blake gains. Blake is resourceful, intelligent, and courageous. Unlike the typical victim character in many disaster films, she actively helps others survive. Her father's training proves essential during the crisis. Ben Taylor. Ben begins as an awkward outsider but becomes heroic through the disaster. He helps protect Blake and Ollie while showing genuine bravery. Dr. Lawrence Hayes. Hayes represents scientific dedication and guilt. He understands the coming disaster but cannot stop it. His warnings help save lives even though the destruction becomes unavoidable. Conclusion. San Andreas is a modern disaster spectacle filled with collapsing skyscrapers, giant earthquakes, tsunamis, and large-scale destruction. However, beneath the action and visual effects lies a surprisingly emotional family story. The movie explores grief, separation, courage, and reconciliation through the experiences of the Gaines family. Ray's desperate journey to save his daughter becomes both a physical rescue mission and an emotional journey toward healing. The enormous disasters provide thrilling action, but the emotional core keeps the story grounded. By the end, the family survives not only the earthquake but also the emotional damage that had been tearing them apart for years. The final message of San Andreas is ultimately hopeful. Even after unimaginable destruction, people can rebuild their lives, reconnect with loved ones, and find strength together again. San Andreas, 2015, is a large-scale American disaster thriller that combines emotional family drama with massive natural destruction. Directed by Brad Peyton and starring Dwayne Johnson, the film presents a terrifying fictional scenario in which the famous San Andreas Fault triggers a catastrophic chain of earthquakes that devastates the western United States. While the movie is filled with spectacular visual effects, collapsing skyscrapers, giant tsunamis, and thrilling rescue sequences, its deeper appeal lies in how it blends human emotion with large-scale disaster storytelling. The film became one of the most memorable modern disaster movies because it delivered both intense action and a personal story about survival, loss, and family reconciliation. At the center of the movie is Raymond "Ray" Gaines, played by Dwayne Johnson. Ray is a rescue helicopter pilot working for the Los Angeles Fire Department. From the beginning of the film, he is shown as fearless, experienced, and deeply committed to saving lives. The opening rescue sequence immediately establishes his heroic personality. A young woman becomes trapped inside a car hanging over the edge of a canyon after a terrible accident. Ray and his rescue team arrive in a helicopter and perform a dangerous operation to save her moments before the car falls into the abyss. This sequence is important because it introduces Ray not only as an action hero but also as a symbol of courage and responsibility. He remains calm under extreme pressure, and his willingness to risk his own life for others becomes the emotional foundation of the entire movie. However, despite his success as a rescuer, Ray's personal life is broken. He is separated from his wife Emma, played by Carla Gugino, and the two are preparing to finalize their divorce. The emotional distance between them is linked to the tragic death of their daughter Mallory years earlier. That devastating loss destroyed the emotional stability of their marriage. Ray buried himself in work while Emma tried to move forward in her own way, but neither truly healed from the trauma. Their surviving daughter Blake, played by Alexandra Daddario, remains one of the few connections keeping them emotionally tied together. This family conflict gives the movie an emotional core that separates it from many other disaster films. Beneath the explosions and destruction is a story about grief, broken relationships, and the possibility of healing. Emma has started a new relationship with Daniel Riddick, a wealthy architect and real estate developer. Daniel represents a different kind of life compared to Ray. He is successful, polished, and financially secure. Emma appears ready to move into a safer and more stable future with him. Yet the film subtly shows that her emotional bond with Ray still exists. Even though they are separated, there is unresolved love between them. This emotional tension becomes increasingly important once disaster strikes. At the same time, the movie introduces Dr. Lawrence Hayes, played by Paul Giamatti, a seismologist working at the California Institute of Technology. Hayes is researching earthquake prediction technology and becomes one of the key scientific voices in the story. He and his colleague Dr. Kim Park discover unusual seismic activity near the Hoover Dam. Suddenly, a massive earthquake destroys the area. The Hoover Dam collapses in spectacular fashion, killing thousands of people and warning the audience that something far worse is coming. Dr. Park sacrifices his life during the disaster, leaving Hayes emotionally devastated but even more determined to warn the public. The destruction of the Hoover Dam serves as the first major indication that the San Andreas Fault is becoming dangerously unstable. Hayes realizes that the earthquakes are not isolated incidents. Instead, they are connected events leading toward a catastrophic chain reaction. His scientific fears quickly become reality as seismic activity spreads toward California. Soon afterward, Los Angeles is hit by a devastating earthquake. Buildings collapse, highways split apart, and entire neighborhoods are thrown into chaos. One of the film's most memorable sequences takes place inside a skyscraper under construction where Emma is visiting Daniel. As the earthquake intensifies, the building begins collapsing around her. Floors shatter, glass explodes, and cranes swing through the air as people desperately try to escape. Ray learns that Emma is trapped and immediately launches a rescue mission in his helicopter. The scene combines emotional urgency with large-scale destruction as Ray flies through collapsing skyscrapers and clouds of debris to reach her. Emma barely survives the collapsing building and eventually reaches the roof, where Ray rescues her just moments before the structure falls apart completely. This sequence is important not only because of its visual intensity but because it reignites the emotional connection between Ray and Emma. Despite their separation, Ray risks everything to save her without hesitation. The disaster forces them back together emotionally and physically. After reuniting, Ray and Emma realize that their daughter Blake is in San Francisco, directly in the path of the worsening earthquakes. Communication systems are failing, roads are destroyed, and panic is spreading across California. Meanwhile, Dr. Hayes predicts that an even larger earthquake is still coming. He warns that the San Andreas Fault could soon unleash the most powerful earthquake in recorded history. Blake's storyline becomes equally important during this part of the film. She is stranded in San Francisco with Daniel's younger sister Susan and meets two British brothers named Ben and Ollie Taylor. Ben is intelligent, kind-hearted, and far more courageous than Daniel eventually proves to be. After another earthquake strikes San Francisco, Blake becomes separated from Susan and teams up with Ben and Ollie to survive the chaos. Unlike many disaster movie characters who simply panic and wait for rescue, Blake is shown as resourceful and capable. Ray previously taught her survival techniques, including emergency medical procedures and disaster preparedness. Those lessons now become essential. Blake helps injured people, stays calm under pressure, and guides the group through collapsing streets and ruined buildings. Her independence makes her one of the strongest characters in the film. The movie also uses Daniel's character to contrast true courage with selfishness. Although he initially appears confident and successful, he reveals his cowardice during the disaster. When another earthquake strikes San Francisco, Daniel abandons Blake, Susan, Ben, and Ollie in order to save himself. He steals a vehicle and escapes alone, leaving the others in danger. This moment completely destroys Emma's remaining faith in him and highlights the difference between Daniel and Ray. Ray repeatedly risks his own life for others, while Daniel prioritizes only himself. The disaster exposes people's true character, and the film clearly presents selflessness as the ultimate form of heroism. As Ray and Emma travel north towards San Francisco, the scale of destruction continues increasing. Their helicopter eventually runs out of fuel, forcing them to land and steal a small plane. During their journey, they witness entire cities burning, highways collapsing into the ocean, and giant cracks tearing across the landscape. The visual effects throughout these sequences are among the film's greatest strengths. Massive buildings crumble realistically, bridges collapse in terrifying detail, and the earth itself seems alive with violent movement. The filmmakers wanted audiences to feel the overwhelming power of nature, and the destruction scenes successfully create that sense of fear and helplessness. Eventually, Ray and Emma crash-land their plane and continue their journey by foot, vehicle, and boat. During these quieter moments between action scenes, the film explores their emotional wounds more deeply. They discuss the death of Mallory and how it destroyed their marriage. Emma admits that she never truly stopped loving Ray, while Ray acknowledges that he emotionally withdrew after their daughter died. The disaster forces them to confront feelings they had avoided for years. In many ways, the physical destruction around them mirrors the emotional destruction within their family. As cities collapse, they begin rebuilding their emotional connection. The climax of the film arrives when Dr. Hayes predicts the arrival of the largest earthquake yet. What happened previously were only foreshocks. Then the massive main quake strikes San Francisco. The destruction is enormous. Skyscrapers collapse throughout the city, roads split apart, trains derail, and giant sinkholes swallow vehicles and people. The famous San Francisco skyline crumbles under the force of the earthquake. The sequence is designed to feel apocalyptic, showing civilization itself breaking apart. The earthquake also triggers a gigantic tsunami that rushes into San Francisco Bay. Massive waves destroy buildings, overturn ships, and flood entire neighborhoods. One unforgettable scene shows a huge cargo ship being carried through the city by the tsunami. The combination of earthquakes and flooding creates nearly non-stop chaos, making survival seem impossible. Blake, Ben, and Ollie become trapped inside a partially collapsed building near the waterfront. Water floods the structure while debris blocks their escape. Ray and Emma finally locate them after following emergency radio signals. However, another shockwave destabilizes the building further, trapping Blake underwater beneath rubble. This leads to the emotional climax of the movie. Ray dives underwater into the submerged ruins to rescue his daughter. The sequence is filled with tension as Blake loses consciousness due to lack of oxygen. Ray eventually reaches her and pulls her to safety, but when they surface, Blake is not breathing. Emma desperately performs CPR while Ray watches helplessly. This moment echoes the earlier trauma of losing Mallory. Ray fears he is about to lose another daughter. The emotional weight of the scene comes not from the disaster itself but from the family's shared grief and terror. For several moments, it appears Blake may die. Then she suddenly coughs and begins breathing again. The family embraces emotionally, finally reunited after surviving unimaginable destruction. This reunion represents more than physical survival. It symbolizes emotional healing and the restoration of the family bond that had been broken for years. The movie ends with survivors gathering across the devastated remains of San Francisco. Rescue helicopters search for victims while American flags rise above the ruined city. Ray, Emma, and Blake stand together looking toward the future. Emma tells Ray they will rebuild together, suggesting that their marriage may also recover. One reason San Andreas became such a major box office success was its ability to combine emotional storytelling with large-scale visual spectacle. The film earned nearly $475 million worldwide against a budget of around $110 million, making it one of the most successful disaster films of the decade. Audiences were drawn to its intense action sequences, emotional family drama, and the charisma of Dwayne Johnson as the heroic lead. Critics gave the film mixed reviews. Many praised the visual effects, action scenes, and performances by Dwayne Johnson and Carla Gugino. The earthquake and tsunami sequences were especially admired for their scale and realism. However, some critics felt the plot followed familiar disaster movie formulas and argued that the supporting characters lacked depth. Despite those criticisms, audiences generally embraced the film because it delivered exactly what viewers expected from a modern disaster thriller: excitement, emotional stakes, and spectacular destruction. Brad Peyton's direction played an important role in balancing these elements. Rather than focusing only on destruction, he kept the emotional journey of the Gaines family at the center of the story. This emotional grounding helped audiences connect with the characters even during the most exaggerated action scenes. The production itself was massive. Principal photography began in Queensland, Australia, before moving to San Francisco. Advanced visual effects technology was used to recreate large-scale earthquakes, collapsing cities, and giant tsunamis. The filmmakers worked carefully to make the disasters feel immersive and believable. The result was a visually impressive movie that captured the terrifying unpredictability of natural disasters. Ultimately, San Andreas is more than just a movie about earthquakes. It is a story about family, survival, courage, and emotional healing. The disasters force characters to reveal their true selves. Some become heroes while others reveal selfishness and fear. Ray Gaines emerges not simply as an action hero but as a father trying to save what remains of his family after years of pain and loss. The film's final message is hopeful. Even after catastrophic destruction, people can rebuild their lives and reconnect with those they love. Cities may collapse, but human resilience survives. That emotional message, combined with thrilling action and spectacular visual effects, is what made San Andreas such a memorable disaster film. The plot of San Andreas, 2015, begins with a terrifying scientific discovery that slowly grows into one of the deadliest natural disasters ever imagined in a Hollywood film. The story combines large-scale destruction with emotional human drama, showing how ordinary people struggle to survive when nature unleashes unstoppable power. At the center of the narrative are two parallel storylines: the scientific attempt to understand and predict the catastrophe, and the emotional journey of a broken family trying to reunite during the collapse of California. The movie opens at the Hoover Dam, one of the most iconic structures in the United States. Dr. Lawrence Hayes, a seismologist from Caltech, arrives there with his colleague Dr. Kim Park to test a revolutionary earthquake prediction system. Hayes is passionate about understanding seismic activity and believes science may finally be close to accurately predicting earthquakes before they occur. For decades, earthquake prediction has been one of the greatest challenges in geology because earthquakes often happen suddenly and without warning. Hayes hopes his research can save countless lives in the future. The atmosphere at Hoover Dam initially feels calm and ordinary. Tourists walk around taking pictures, workers perform maintenance duties, and no one suspects disaster is approaching. Hayes and Park begin placing their experimental sensors around the area while discussing unusual seismic readings coming from a nearby unknown fault line. At first, the tremors seem minor, but Hayes notices that the energy levels are increasing rapidly. The tension slowly builds as the scientists realize something abnormal is happening beneath the Earth's surface. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake violently. What starts as a mild tremor instantly escalates into a catastrophic MW 7.1 earthquake. The Hoover Dam begins collapsing in spectacular fashion. Massive concrete walls crack apart, metal structures twist violently, and giant sections of the dam crumble into the raging water below. Tourists scream and run in panic while debris falls everywhere. The sequence is chaotic and terrifying because it shows how quickly civilization can collapse when nature strikes unexpectedly. During the disaster, Dr. Kim Park notices a young girl trapped in danger as floodwaters and collapsing debris surround her. Without hesitation, he sacrifices his own safety to rescue the child. Park succeeds in saving her, but he himself is swept away by the violent water unleashed by the dam's destruction. His death becomes one of the first emotional moments in the film. Park's sacrifice highlights the movie's recurring theme of heroism during catastrophe. Even in moments of overwhelming destruction, some people choose to risk their lives for others. Dr. Hayes survives the collapse but is deeply shaken by both the disaster and the loss of his colleague. However, he quickly realizes something even more frightening: the earthquake was not an isolated event. After analyzing the seismic data, Hayes discovers that the entire San Andreas Fault system is becoming unstable. The energy beneath California is building toward a chain reaction of gigantic earthquakes capable of devastating multiple cities along the west coast. This discovery changes the scale of the story completely. What initially seemed like a terrible local disaster is actually the beginning of something far worse. Hayes understands that millions of people are now in danger. He begins desperately trying to warn government officials and the public before the fault fully ruptures. Alongside his students Alexi and Phoebe, as well as reporter Serena Johnson and cameraman Dylan, Hayes races against time to spread information before the next earthquake strike. The inclusion of reporters in the story is important because it demonstrates how modern disasters unfold not only physically but also through media coverage. Serena Johnson becomes the voice carrying Hayes' warnings to the public. Through live broadcasts and emergency reports, the growing panic spreads across California as scientists struggle to understand the scale of the coming catastrophe. While Hayes focuses on the scientific crisis, the film shifts attention to another storyline centered on Raymond "Ray" Gaines, played by Dwayne Johnson. Ray works as a rescue helicopter pilot for the Los Angeles Fire Department. He is introduced as a fearless professional capable of handling extreme situations, but beneath his heroic exterior lies emotional pain. Ray is in the middle of a divorce from his wife Emma, and their marriage has been slowly falling apart for years. The emotional distance between Ray and Emma is connected to the tragic death of their daughter Mallory, who drowned several years earlier. The loss shattered their family emotionally. Ray coped by focusing obsessively on his rescue work, while Emma tried to move forward with her life. Their surviving daughter Blake remains the strongest connection between them, but their relationship is still filled with unresolved grief and sadness. When the massive MW 9.1 earthquake strikes Los Angeles, Ray's personal and professional worlds collide. The earthquake sequence is one of the film's most visually intense moments. Entire skyscrapers sway violently, highways crack apart, bridges collapse, and buildings explode into clouds of dust. The city becomes a nightmare of destruction within seconds. Emma happens to be inside a skyscraper during the quake. The building begins collapsing around her as glass shatters and floors break apart. People panic as they desperately try to escape before the entire structure falls. Ray learns that Emma is trapped and immediately launches a rescue mission in his helicopter. This sequence is crucial because it reveals Ray's true character. Despite their separation and emotional struggles, he never hesitates to save Emma. He risks his life flying through collapsing skyscrapers and dangerous debris fields to reach her. The rescue is thrilling, but emotionally it also marks the beginning of reconciliation between them. The disaster forces them back together and reminds them of the emotional bond they still share. Meanwhile, their daughter Blake is in San Francisco with Emma's wealthy new boyfriend Daniel Riddick. Daniel is a successful engineer and builder known for his intelligence and influence. He represents the stable, sophisticated life Emma has been trying to build after separating from Ray. Blake accompanies Daniel to San Francisco because she is preparing for a new stage in her life and trying to maintain peace between her parents and Emma's new relationship. In San Francisco, Blake meets Ben Taylor, a young British engineer hoping to work for Daniel's company. Ben is accompanied by his younger brother Ollie. Ben immediately appears kind, intelligent, and genuine. Unlike Daniel, who often seems focused on status and control, Ben possesses warmth and humility. Blake quickly develops a connection with him. As Daniel and Blake attempt to leave a building during the growing crisis, another massive earthquake strikes San Francisco. The city erupts into chaos as buildings collapse, streets split open, and parking structures crumble. During the disaster, Blake becomes trapped inside Daniel's car when rubble from a collapsing parking garage crushes the vehicle. At first, Daniel promises he will find help. However, as the situation worsens, panic overtakes him. Instead of returning to rescue Blake, he abandons her entirely in order to save himself. This moment completely changes how viewers see Daniel. Earlier he appeared successful and confident, but the disaster reveals his cowardice and selfishness. The contrast between Daniel and Ray becomes very clear. Ray repeatedly risks his life for others, while Daniel abandons someone he claims to care about. The moment survival becomes difficult. Ben and Ollie eventually rescue Blake from the trapped car. Together, the three navigate the collapsing city and take shelter in Chinatown. This part of the movie transforms Blake from a passive victim into an active survivor. Earlier in the story, Ray had taught her emergency survival skills, including first aid and crisis management. Those lessons now become essential. Blake helps injured people, stays calm under pressure, and proves herself highly resourceful during the disaster. The growing bond between Blake and Ben also adds emotional depth to the film. Their relationship develops naturally through shared danger and trust. Ben becomes one of the few people Blake can rely on after Daniel abandons her. Ollie, though younger and frightened, provides moments of humanity and emotional warmth amid the destruction. Blake eventually manages to contact her parents, informing them that she is trapped in San Francisco. Ray and Emma immediately decide they must reach her no matter what obstacles stand in their way. Ray and Emma begin traveling north in Ray's rescue helicopter, hoping to reach San Francisco before the city is completely destroyed. However, the journey quickly becomes even more dangerous. Their helicopter suffers a gearbox failure, forcing them to make an emergency landing at a shopping mall in Bakersfield. The shopping mall sequence highlights another aspect of disaster psychology: social collapse. The area is filled with panic, chaos, looting, and desperation. People fight over supplies while others attempt to flee the city. Civilization itself appears to be breaking down under the pressure of fear and uncertainty. Realizing they cannot continue by helicopter, Ray steals a truck so they can keep moving towards San Francisco. During their drive, they encounter an elderly couple stranded beside the highway after their vehicle breaks down. This seemingly small moment becomes extremely important. The elderly couple unknowingly prevents Ray and Emma from driving directly into a gigantic fissure caused by the San Andreas Fault. The earthquake has literally torn the earth apart, creating a massive canyon stretching across the highway as far as the eye can see. The image symbolizes the overwhelming scale of the disaster. Nature is not simply shaking buildings, it is physically reshaping the landscape itself. Ray and Emma exchange their truck for a small airplane owned by the elderly couple. This exchange represents one of the film's recurring themes: cooperation and human kindness during catastrophe. Even amid fear and destruction, strangers help one another survive. As Ray and Emma fly towards San Francisco, the movie slows down briefly to focus on their emotional relationship. Away from immediate danger, they begin discussing their daughter Mallory, whose death destroyed their marriage years earlier. These scenes are emotionally important because they reveal the deeper pain beneath the action. Mallory drowned during a rafting accident, and both Ray and Emma still carry guilt and heartbreak from losing her. Ray blames himself because he could not save her despite being a professional rescuer. Emma struggled emotionally after the tragedy and eventually distanced herself from Ray because their grief pushed them apart rather than together. For the first time in years, they speak honestly about their pain. The disaster surrounding them forces emotional honesty because they understand they may not survive. Emma admits she never truly stopped loving Ray, while Ray acknowledges how emotionally unavailable he became after Mallory's death. This emotional conversation transforms the movie from a simple disaster thriller into a story about healing and reconciliation. The physical destruction happening across California mirrors the emotional destruction within their family. Yet just as survivors begin rebuilding after disasters, Ray and Emma slowly begin rebuilding their relationship. Throughout these sequences, San Andreas balances large-scale spectacle with deeply personal storytelling. The collapsing cities, giant earthquakes, and massive fissures create visual excitement, but the emotional heart of the film remains centered on family. Every major action scene ultimately connects back to Ray's determination to save the people he loves. The plot also emphasizes the unpredictability and overwhelming power of nature. Scientific advancements may help predict disasters, but humans remain fragile compared to the forces beneath the earth. Entire cities collapse within minutes despite advanced technology and modern infrastructure. The film constantly reminds viewers that civilization itself can be terrifyingly vulnerable. At the same time, the story celebrates resilience and courage. Characters like Ray, Blake, Ben, Dr. Hayes, and Dr. Park demonstrate selflessness during impossible situations. Even when surrounded by destruction, they continue helping others rather than surrendering to fear. By combining emotional family drama with spectacular disaster sequences, San Andreas creates a thrilling and emotionally engaging narrative. The earthquakes serve not only as physical threats but also as catalysts forcing characters to confront grief, fear, love, and sacrifice. The result is a story that feels both massive in scale and deeply personal at the same time. The final act of San Andreas, 2015, represents the emotional and visual climax of the entire movie. By this point in the story, California has already suffered unimaginable devastation from massive earthquakes along the San Andreas Fault, but the worst destruction is still yet to come. The film transforms from a survival thriller into a full-scale apocalyptic disaster as San Francisco becomes the center of nature's fury. These final sequences combine emotional family drama, massive destruction, heroic rescues, and the ultimate theme of hope rising from catastrophe. At this stage of the story, Blake Gaines, along with Ben and Ollie Taylor, is desperately trying to survive inside a collapsing San Francisco. The city has already suffered enormous earthquake damage. Buildings have fallen, fires rage across neighborhoods, streets are cracked open, and communication systems are failing. Everywhere people are panicking, searching for loved ones, or attempting to escape before the next disaster strikes. Blake, Ben, and Ollie initially plan to reunite with Ray and Emma at Coit Tower, one of San Francisco's most famous landmarks. Throughout the movie, Coit Tower symbolizes safety and reunion because it stands high above much of the city and serves as an easily recognizable meeting point. However, when the group finally reaches the area, they discover that Coit Tower has been engulfed in flames. The surrounding area is collapsing into chaos, making the location impossible to use. This moment is important because it destroys the group's sense of certainty. Until then, Blake still believed there was a clear destination where her parents would find her. Seeing Coit Tower burning forces the group to improvise once again in the middle of disaster. It reinforces one of the film's central ideas: during catastrophic events, plans can collapse instantly, and survival depends on adaptability. Ben suggests heading toward Nob Hill instead, another elevated area in San Francisco where they may be able to signal Ray and Emma. The journey toward Nob Hill becomes increasingly dangerous as aftershocks continue shaking the city. Meanwhile, Ray and Emma continue their desperate search for Blake. Having survived multiple disasters already, they approach San Francisco by air. However, conditions become so unstable that they are forced to parachute into AT&T Park, the baseball stadium near the waterfront. The image of Ray and Emma parachuting into a ruined city is one of the movie's most dramatic visual moments. It symbolizes both desperation and determination. They are willing to risk everything to reach their daughter. Just as they land, the most catastrophic earthquake in recorded history strikes San Francisco. The movie describes the quake as a MW 9.6 earthquake, making it even more powerful than any previously recorded real-world earthquake. The scale of destruction shown during this sequence is almost beyond imagination. Entire skyscrapers collapse simultaneously, roads twist apart like ribbons, and huge sections of the city crumble into the bay. The ground itself appears alive, violently shifting beneath people's feet. This earthquake represents the full rupture of the San Andreas Fault. Earlier quakes in Los Angeles and elsewhere were only warnings of the true catastrophe building underground. Now the accumulated seismic energy is finally released all at once. The result is almost apocalyptic. The visual effects during this scene are among the film's most impressive achievements. Buildings split apart while people run through clouds of dust and falling debris. Massive sinkholes swallow cars and entire sections of streets. Bridges collapse, fires erupt everywhere, and the skyline itself changes shape as structures disappear into rubble. Yet despite the overwhelming destruction, the emotional focus remains on Ray and Emma's mission to save Blake. Even as the city collapses around them, they continue searching. Their determination reflects the movie's core belief that human love and family bonds can survive even the most impossible circumstances. After the earthquake subsides, San Francisco is almost unrecognizable. Much of the city lies in ruins. Entire districts have collapsed, and thousands of people are dead or trapped beneath debris. But another disaster is already approaching. Ray and Emma commandeer a boat in order to reach Blake and the others more quickly. The roads are destroyed, making water travel the only possible option. As they move through the bay, they realize something horrifying. The giant earthquake has triggered a tsunami rushing towards San Francisco Bay. The tsunami sequence dramatically increases the scale of the disaster. Until this point, the danger came mainly from the Earth itself. Now the ocean becomes equally deadly. Massive waves begin forming outside the bay, towering above ships and buildings. Ray quickly understands that staying near shore means certain death. Instead of fleeing away from the wave, he makes the dangerous decision to drive the boat directly toward it. This choice is based on survival instinct and experience. Trying to outrun a tsunami from behind would be impossible. Their only chance is to cross the wave before it fully crests. Alongside a few other survivors in boats and small ships, Ray pushes the vessel forward at maximum speed. The sequence is filled with tension because the wave grows larger with every second. The ocean becomes violent and chaotic as debris, overturned boats, and collapsing structures fill the water. One of the most memorable moments occurs when a massive container ship becomes trapped inside the tsunami wave. The enormous vessel is carried helplessly towards San Francisco like a floating weapon of destruction. Ray's small boat barely avoids colliding with it. The container ship eventually crashes into the center span of the Golden Gate Bridge in spectacular fashion. The impact destroys part of the bridge and kills everyone still trapped there. Among the victims is Daniel Riddick. Daniel's death carries symbolic importance in the story. Earlier in the film, he abandoned Blake during the earthquake out of fear and selfishness. Unlike Ray, who constantly risks himself for others, Daniel consistently prioritized his own survival. His death beneath falling shipping containers becomes a form of narrative justice. The movie suggests that courage and loyalty matter far more than wealth, status, or professional success. The destruction of the Golden Gate Bridge is also symbolically powerful. The bridge is one of America's most recognizable landmarks and represents connection, stability, and modern engineering. Its collapse shows how completely nature has overwhelmed human civilization. Then the tsunami slams into San Francisco itself. The wave crashes through the already ruined city with unstoppable force. Buildings are flooded instantly, streets disappear beneath water, and thousands more people die. Ships are thrown into urban areas while vehicles are swept away like toys. A giant cruise ship capsizes violently in the harbor, adding to the chaos and destruction. The tsunami scenes emphasize the terrifying scale of natural disasters. Unlike human enemies in action movies, nature cannot be negotiated with or defeated. The wave destroys everything in its path without emotion or mercy. The combination of earthquakes and flooding makes San Francisco look almost post-apocalyptic. Meanwhile, Blake, Ben, and Ollie take shelter inside a building called the Gate, a modern structure whose construction Daniel had overseen before the disaster. The choice of location is significant because it connects back to Daniel's career and ambitions. The building symbolizes human confidence in technology and architecture. Yet despite its modern design, even the Gate cannot withstand the forces unleashed by the earthquake and tsunami. As the tsunami strikes, water floods the building rapidly. The structure begins collapsing around them while floors crack apart and debris falls from above. Blake, Ben, and Ollie struggle to escape as the building slowly sinks into chaos. During the collapse, Blake becomes trapped underwater beneath debris. This creates the emotional climax of the film. Ray arrives just in time and immediately dives into the submerged building to rescue her. The underwater rescue sequence is intense and emotional because it connects directly to the tragedy that destroyed Ray's family years earlier. Earlier in the movie, viewers learn that Ray and Emma lost their daughter Mallory in a drowning accident. Ray has carried guilt ever since because he could not save her. Now history seems to be repeating itself as Blake lies trapped underwater, unconscious and running out of time. The scene becomes deeply personal for Ray. This is no longer just another rescue mission. It is a chance to confront his greatest emotional trauma. If Blake dies, he will lose another daughter the same way he lost Mallory. Ray manages to free Blake from the debris and brings her to the surface, but she is not breathing. The following moments are some of the most emotional in the entire film. Ray desperately performs CPR while Emma watches in fear and heartbreak. The chaos surrounding them fades emotionally because, for Ray and Emma, nothing matters except whether Blake survives. As Ray struggles to revive her, Emma crashes the boat through one of the building's windows in an incredibly dramatic rescue maneuver. She drives the boat into the collapsing structure itself, allowing everyone to escape before the building falls apart completely. Finally, after several terrifying moments, Blake coughs and begins breathing again. This moment represents emotional redemption for Ray. Years earlier, he failed to save Mallory, a trauma that destroyed his marriage and haunted him emotionally. Saving Blake allows him to confront that pain and finally overcome it. The rescue becomes not only physical survival but emotional healing. The 5 survivors, Ray, Emma, Blake, Ben, and Ollie, eventually escape the collapsing building and make their way to safety. After the disasters finally subside, survivors gather at a relief camp on the other side of the bay. The atmosphere here is very different from the earlier chaos. Instead of panic and destruction, the focus shifts toward recovery and hope. Ray and Emma, now emotionally reconciled, discuss their future together. The disaster forced them to confront years of unresolved grief and emotional separation. By surviving together and saving Blake, they rediscovered the love and trust that had once defined their marriage. Ben and Ollie also become part of this newly formed emotional family unit. Ben's bravery and loyalty throughout the disaster earned Ray and Emma's respect, while Ollie's survival adds warmth and humanity to the ending. One of the film's final images shows an American flag unfurling over the damaged remains of the Golden Gate Bridge. This moment carries strong symbolic meaning. Despite the unimaginable destruction, the flag represents resilience, unity, and hope for rebuilding. Rescue helicopters, emergency vehicles, and relief workers spread across the devastated landscape of the San Francisco Bay Area. The film reveals that the geography itself has been permanently altered. The San Francisco Peninsula has effectively become an island, and the bay now stretches dramatically farther inland, reaching from San Jose to Santa Cruz. This detail emphasizes the enormous scale of the disaster. Nature has not merely damaged buildings, it has reshaped the land itself. Entire regions have changed forever. Yet the ending remains hopeful rather than hopeless. Although cities have collapsed and countless lives have been lost, survivors continue helping one another. Families reunite, rescue efforts begin, and people prepare to rebuild. The movie's final message is ultimately about human resilience. Even after overwhelming destruction, humanity endures. The conclusion of San Andreas works because it balances spectacle with emotion. The earthquakes, tsunami, collapsing bridges, and destroyed skyscrapers create thrilling visual entertainment, but the emotional story of Ray, Emma, and Blake gives the disaster meaning. Their journey is not simply about surviving earthquakes. It is about healing from grief, rediscovering love, and rebuilding family bonds after years of emotional damage. In the end, the movie suggests that while nature may destroy cities, it cannot destroy hope, courage, or the human ability to rebuild. The cast of San Andreas, 2015, plays a major role in bringing the film's emotional intensity, action, and large-scale disaster sequences to life. Although the movie is centered around earthquakes, tsunamis, collapsing cities, and survival, its emotional strength comes from the performances of the actors who portray ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. Each character contributes to the film's themes of courage, family, sacrifice, fear, and hope. Together, the cast transforms the movie from a simple disaster spectacle into a story about human resilience during unimaginable destruction. At the center of the film is Dwayne Johnson as Raymond "Ray" Gaines, the movie's main protagonist. Ray works as a chief rescue helicopter pilot for the Los Angeles Fire Department. He is portrayed as fearless, highly skilled, and deeply committed to saving lives. Dwayne Johnson's performance is essential to the success of the film because he gives Ray both physical strength and emotional vulnerability. Ray is introduced as a heroic rescuer during the opening sequence when he saves a woman trapped in a car hanging over a canyon. This immediately establishes him as someone who thrives under pressure and willingly risks his own life for others. However, beneath his heroic exterior lies emotional pain. Ray's marriage is collapsing, and he is haunted by the death of his daughter Mallory years earlier. Johnson balances the action hero side of the character with emotional depth, showing Ray as both physically powerful and emotionally wounded. One of the reasons Ray feels believable is because Johnson portrays him as a father first and an action hero second. Throughout the movie, Ray's motivation is not fame, revenge, or glory. Everything he does is driven by love for his family. His journey across a collapsing California to save his daughter Blake becomes emotionally compelling because Johnson makes Ray's fear and determination feel genuine. Ray also represents the ideal version of heroism in the film. He repeatedly risks his own safety to help others, even strangers. While earthquakes destroy cities around him, Ray remains calm and focused. His courage contrasts sharply with characters who panic or abandon others during the crisis. Johnson's natural charisma helps make Ray the emotional center of the movie. Carla Gugino plays Emma Gaines, Ray's estranged wife. Emma is one of the most emotionally important characters in the story because she represents the emotional wounds within the Gaines family. Before the disaster begins, Emma and Ray are separated and preparing for divorce. Their relationship deteriorated after the tragic death of their daughter Mallory, an event that emotionally shattered both of them. Carla Gugino gives Emma warmth, intelligence, and emotional realism. Rather than portraying her simply as a victim waiting to be rescued, Gugino shows Emma as capable and resilient. During the earthquake sequences, Emma survives terrifying situations through determination and quick thinking. Even when trapped inside collapsing skyscrapers, she continues fighting to survive. Emma's emotional arc throughout the film is deeply connected to grief and healing. At first, she appears ready to move on with her new boyfriend Daniel Riddick. However, as the disaster unfolds, she realizes that her emotional connection with Ray never truly disappeared. Gugino portrays Emma's inner conflict subtly, showing both lingering love and emotional exhaustion. The scenes between Emma and Ray are among the film's most emotional moments. As they travel through destroyed cities trying to save Blake, old feelings resurface. Gugino's performance helps make their reconciliation believable because she portrays Emma not as someone suddenly changing her mind, but as someone rediscovering emotional trust after years of pain. Alexandra Daddario plays Blake Gaines, the daughter of Ray and Emma. Blake becomes one of the movie's strongest and most resourceful characters. In many disaster films, younger characters are portrayed mainly as helpless victims, but Blake is very different. She actively helps others survive and proves herself capable under extreme pressure. Daddario gives Blake intelligence, courage, and emotional maturity. Blake clearly inherited her father's survival instincts and calmness during emergencies. Earlier in the story, Ray taught her survival skills, and those lessons become essential during the disaster. When San Francisco begins collapsing around her, Blake does not freeze in panic. Instead, she helps injured people, makes quick decisions, and keeps moving forward. Blake also serves as the emotional bridge between Ray and Emma. Even though her parents are separated, Blake still loves both of them deeply and hopes they can reconnect emotionally. Her survival becomes the driving force behind Ray and Emma's journey across California. Daddario also creates believable chemistry with Hugo Johnston Burt's character Ben Taylor. Their growing relationship adds emotional warmth to the movie during moments of destruction and chaos. Blake's combination of vulnerability and strength makes her one of the film's most memorable characters. Ioan Gruffudd portrays Daniel Riddick, Emma's wealthy boyfriend and the owner of a civil engineering firm. Daniel initially appears successful, confident, and sophisticated. He represents stability and financial security, especially compared to Ray's dangerous rescue career. However, as the disaster intensifies, Daniel's true personality emerges. Gruffudd portrays Daniel as someone who appears strong when life is comfortable but falls apart under genuine pressure. During the earthquake in San Francisco, Daniel abandons Blake in order to save himself. This moment completely changes the audience's perception of him. Daniel's cowardice is important because it creates a direct contrast with Ray's heroism. While Ray constantly risks his life for family and strangers alike, Daniel chooses self-preservation. Gruffudd plays this transformation effectively because he avoids making Daniel cartoonishly evil. Instead, Daniel feels like a realistic example of how fear can reveal weakness in people during catastrophic situations. Daniel's eventual death during the tsunami sequence carries symbolic meaning. His professional success and wealth become meaningless against the power of nature. The movie uses his character to show that true strength comes from courage and loyalty rather than status or money. Archie Punjabi plays Serena Johnson, a television news reporter covering the unfolding disaster. Serena represents the role of media during moments of national crisis. Through her broadcasts, the public learns about the earthquakes and the growing danger facing California. Punjabi portrays Serena as determined and professional. Rather than fleeing immediately, she continues reporting despite the danger surrounding her. Serena's character helps communicate scientific information to the audience, especially through her interactions with Dr. Lawrence Hayes. Her cameraman Dylan, played by Ben McIver, supports her throughout the disaster coverage. Together, they symbolize journalists risking their lives to inform the public during catastrophic events. Paul Giamatti plays Dr. Lawrence Hayes, one of the most important supporting characters in the movie. Hayes is a Caltech seismologist who discovers that the San Andreas Fault is becoming dangerously unstable. Giamatti's performance gives the film much of its scientific and emotional credibility. Hayes is not portrayed as a stereotypical cold scientist. Instead, Giamatti makes him deeply human. He is passionate about his research because he genuinely wants to save lives. When the Hoover Dam collapses and his colleague Dr. Kim Park dies, Hayes is emotionally devastated. Yet he continues working desperately to warn people about the coming earthquakes. Giamatti brings urgency and intelligence to the role. His scenes help explain the scientific side of the disaster while also conveying the terror of realizing millions of people may die. Hayes becomes the voice of warning throughout the film, desperately trying to convince authorities and the public that an unprecedented catastrophe is approaching. Unlike Ray, who fights physically against the disaster, Hayes fights intellectually. Both men become heroes in different ways. Ray rescues people directly, while Hayes tries to save lives through knowledge and warnings. Hugo Johnston-Burt plays Ben Taylor, a young British engineer searching for work at Daniel's company. Ben becomes one of Blake's closest allies after the earthquake strikes San Francisco. Ben is introduced as somewhat awkward and uncertain, but the disaster reveals his bravery and kindness. Unlike Daniel, Ben consistently risks himself to help others. He rescues Blake from the parking garage after Daniel abandons her and continues protecting both Blake and his younger brother Ollie throughout the film. Johnston-Burt portrays Ben as relatable and genuine. He is not a superhero or trained rescuer like Ray. Instead, he is an ordinary person trying to survive while helping others. His growing relationship with Blake adds emotional warmth to the movie and gives the younger characters a hopeful future. Art Parkinson plays Ollie Taylor, Ben's younger brother. Ollie provides emotional innocence during the disaster. While older characters focus on survival and responsibility, Ollie often reacts with fear, amazement, and vulnerability that reflect how an ordinary child might respond during such catastrophic events. Despite being frightened, Ollie remains brave and loyal to his brother and Blake. Parkinson's performance adds emotional humanity to the story because Ollie reminds audiences of the countless innocent people caught in disasters beyond their control. Will-Yoon Lee portrays Dr. Kim Park, Dr. Hayes' research partner and closest friend. Although Kim Park's screen time is relatively short, his role is emotionally significant. Park dies during the Hoover Dam collapse while saving a little girl from the floodwaters. His sacrifice establishes one of the movie's central themes, heroism through selflessness. Park's death deeply affects Hayes and motivates him to continue warning the public despite overwhelming fear and chaos. Lee's performance gives the character dignity and emotional impact despite limited scenes. Kylie Minogue appears as Susan Riddick, Daniel's sister. Susan accompanies Blake during the early part of the San Francisco storyline. Although her role is smaller compared to the main cast, she contributes to the realism of the disaster by representing ordinary civilians caught in extraordinary circumstances. Susan's growing fear and confusion during the earthquakes reflect the panic experienced by millions of people across California. Minogue portrays her sympathetically, helping audiences feel the human cost of the catastrophe. Alec Utgorf plays Alexi, one of Dr. Hayes' students. Alongside Phoebe, played by Marissa Neatling, Alexi assists Hayes in monitoring seismic activity and spreading warnings about the earthquakes. These younger scientists represent the next generation of researchers working to understand natural disasters. Both characters help support Hayes emotionally and scientifically as the crisis escalates. Their presence also emphasizes how teamwork becomes essential during emergencies. Todd Williams portrays Marcus Crowlings, a rescue worker and helicopter winch operator working alongside Ray in the Los Angeles Fire Department. Matt Gerald plays Harrison Rhodes, another rescue team member and helicopter co-pilot. Colton Haynes appears as Joby O'Leary, a rescue helicopter winchman. These characters contribute to the realism of Ray's professional world. They show that large-scale rescue operations depend on teamwork and trust. Even though Ray is the central hero, he relies on skilled colleagues willing to risk their lives during dangerous missions. Arabella Morton portrays Mallory Gaines in flashbacks. Although Mallory died before the events of the movie, her presence emotionally shapes the entire story. Her drowning accident destroyed Ray and Emma's marriage and left lasting emotional scars on the family. Mallory's memory becomes especially important during the film's climax when Blake nearly drowns. Ray's desperate attempt to save Blake emotionally mirrors his inability to save Mallory years earlier. Morton's brief appearances carry enormous emotional weight because they represent the grief haunting the Gaines family. The supporting cast also includes Morgan Griffin as Natalie, Brianne Hill as Larissa the waitress, Julian Shaw as Stoner, John Reynolds as Daniel's driver, Hugh Francis as Daniel's assistant, Brad McMurray as a security guard, and Joey Vieira as a man trapped in the parking garage. Though these roles are smaller, they help create the feeling of a living world filled with ordinary people trying to survive overwhelming disaster. Together, the cast of San Andreas creates a balance between emotional storytelling and large-scale action spectacle. Each actor contributes something unique to the film's themes of survival, family, courage, and resilience. The earthquake and tsunami sequences provide thrilling visual excitement, but it is the performances of the cast that make audiences emotionally care about what happens. The relationships between the characters give meaning to the destruction surrounding them. Ray's determination to save Blake, Emma's emotional reconciliation with Ray, Blake's growing independence, Ben's bravery, Hayes' scientific warnings, and even Daniel's cowardice all contribute to a story that feels emotionally grounded despite its massive scale. Ultimately, the cast helps transform San Andreas from a simple disaster movie into a human story about people confronting fear, loss, and hope during the collapse of an entire region. The production and development of San Andreas, 2015, represent the long and carefully planned process behind creating one of Hollywood's biggest modern disaster films. Although audiences eventually saw a fast-paced movie filled with giant earthquakes, collapsing skyscrapers, tsunamis, and emotional rescue sequences, the journey toward bringing the film to theaters took several years of planning, rewriting, visual design, technical preparation, and collaboration between major studios and filmmakers. The development process reveals how disaster films are often built through constant evolution, where writers, producers, directors, and studios gradually shape the story into a large-scale cinematic experience. The origins of San Andreas began on December 1, 2011, when New Line Cinema announced that it was developing a new earthquake disaster film titled San Andreas, 3D. At that stage, the project was still in its early concept phase. The studio wanted to create a modern disaster movie inspired by fears surrounding the real San Andreas Fault, the massive geological fault line running through California that scientists have long warned could produce a devastating earthquake known as the Big One. Disaster films have always been a popular genre in Hollywood because they combine large-scale spectacle with human survival stories. Movies about earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, and global destruction often attract audiences because they tap into universal fears about nature's uncontrollable power. However, by 2011, audiences had already seen many disaster films over the decades, meaning San Andreas needed something fresh to stand out. The filmmakers wanted to create a movie that felt modern, emotionally engaging, and visually groundbreaking. The initial screenplay was written by Jeremy Passmore and Andre Fabrizio. Their early version of the story focused on the terrifying possibility of massive earthquakes destroying California. At its core, the script aimed to combine scientific disaster scenarios with a deeply personal rescue story centered around a family struggling to survive. The idea of blending emotional family drama with spectacular destruction became one of the defining features of the film. Rather than focusing only on earthquakes and visual effects, the writers wanted audiences to emotionally connect with the characters trapped inside the disaster. This emotional approach would later become central to the movie's success. However, large Hollywood productions often go through multiple script revisions before cameras begin rolling. Studios constantly refine stories to improve pacing, characters, emotional impact, and commercial appeal. After Passmore and Fabrizio completed the initial screenplay, writer Alan Loeb was brought in to polish the script. A script polish usually involves improving dialogue, strengthening emotional scenes, refining character relationships, and making the story flow more smoothly. Loeb's work likely focused on making the emotional journey of the Gaines family more compelling while ensuring the disaster sequences connected naturally to the characters' personal struggles. The emotional storyline involving Ray Gaines, Emma, Blake, and the memory of Mallory became especially important because disaster films often risk feeling emotionally empty if audiences do not care about the characters. The filmmakers understood that viewers needed more than just collapsing buildings and explosions. They needed emotional stakes. On June 5, 2012, New Line Cinema officially hired Brad Peyton to direct the film. This decision would become extremely important because Peyton's directing style strongly influenced the final tone of the movie. Brad Peyton had already worked with Dwayne Johnson before San Andreas, and the two developed a successful creative partnership. Peyton understood how to balance Johnson's larger-than-life action hero image with emotional vulnerability and humor. This combination became one of the strengths of San Andreas. Peyton approached the movie not simply as a visual spectacle but as a human survival story set against massive destruction. He wanted audiences to feel emotionally connected to the Gaines family while also being overwhelmed by the scale of the earthquakes and tsunamis. Directing a disaster film is especially difficult because the filmmaker must balance multiple elements at once. The movie needs thrilling action scenes, emotional character development, believable visual effects, scientific tension, and non-stop pacing. Peyton's challenge was to make all these elements work together without allowing one aspect to overpower the others. One of Peyton's major goals was realism in emotional reactions, even if the disaster scale itself was exaggerated for cinematic purposes. He wanted viewers to imagine how ordinary people might behave during such catastrophic events. This is why the movie spends significant time focusing on family relationships, fear, grief, and survival decisions. On July 18, 2012, Carlton Cuse was hired to rewrite the screenplay. Cuse was already known for his experience in television storytelling and dramatic structure. Bringing him into the project showed that the studio wanted stronger character development and emotional storytelling alongside the action. Cuse's involvement likely helped shape the family-centered narrative that became the emotional backbone of the movie. The relationship between Ray and Emma, their grief over Mallory's death, and Blake's survival journey all became more emotionally layered than typical disaster movie characters. The emotional tension between Ray and Emma became especially important. Their separation before the disaster adds depth to the story because the earthquakes force them back together physically and emotionally. Instead of simply surviving collapsing cities, the characters are also confronting unresolved grief and broken relationships. The script rewrites also helped improve pacing. Disaster films must carefully balance quiet emotional scenes with intense action sequences. Too much action without emotional breaks can exhaust audiences, while too much dialogue can slow momentum. The rewrites helped create a rhythm where personal drama and large-scale destruction supported each other. On July 18, 2013, another major rewrite occurred when Carey Hayes and Chad Hayes joined the project. The Hayes brothers were already known for writing horror films, particularly The Conjuring. Their experience with suspense and tension likely influenced the way San Andreas handled fear and large-scale disaster sequences. Although San Andreas is not a horror movie, many of its most intense scenes rely on suspense and anticipation. The filmmakers wanted earthquakes to feel terrifying and unpredictable, almost like a monster attacking cities from beneath the earth. The Hayes brothers' ability to build tension may have helped strengthen these sequences. By this point, the screenplay had evolved through multiple creative voices, each adding something new. This is common in major Hollywood productions, especially expensive blockbuster films where studios want the strongest possible combination of emotional storytelling, action, and audience appeal. The production was backed by several companies, including New Line Cinema, Village Roadshow Pictures, Flynn Picture Company, and Australian Limited Village Roadshow. The involvement of multiple production companies reflected the enormous scale of the project. Disaster films require huge budgets because they depend heavily on visual effects, large sets, location shooting, stunt work, and advanced technology. Village Roadshow Pictures had experience producing major blockbuster films and played an important role in financing and supporting the movie. Flynn Picture Company, led by producer Beau Flynn, also became central to the film's production. Flynn specialized in large-scale commercial entertainment and helped guide the project from development into full production. One of the most important creative decisions during production was casting Dwayne Johnson as Ray Gaines. Johnson had already become one of Hollywood's biggest action stars by the time San Andreas entered production. His combination of physical presence, charisma, and emotional sincerity made him ideal for the role. The filmmakers needed a lead actor who could convincingly perform dangerous action sequences while also carrying the emotional weight of the story. Johnson's performance helped make Ray feel more than just a typical action hero. He became a father trying desperately to save his family during impossible circumstances. Casting Johnson also increased the film's commercial appeal worldwide. Disaster movies depend heavily on global audiences because of their large budgets, and Johnson's international popularity helped attract viewers across many countries. The film's production design focused heavily on realism mixed with cinematic spectacle. The filmmakers researched real earthquake science and studied how seismic destruction affects cities. While the movie exaggerated earthquake intensity for dramatic purposes, the creative team wanted the destruction to feel visually believable. This required enormous planning from visual effects artists, engineers, production designers, and stunt coordinators. Entire city blocks had to be digitally recreated so they could collapse realistically during earthquake scenes. One of the film's greatest technical challenges involved creating realistic destruction for famous California landmarks. The Hoover Dam collapse, the destruction of Los Angeles skyscrapers, the tsunami hitting San Francisco, and the collapse of the Golden Gate Bridge all required advanced visual effects technology. The filmmakers wanted audiences to feel immersed inside the disasters rather than simply watching them from a distance. Cameras were often positioned close to characters during destruction scenes so viewers experienced the chaos from a human perspective. Another important aspect of production involved balancing practical effects with computer-generated imagery. While CGI created massive destruction, practical sets and stunt work helped actors react realistically to their surroundings. Collapsing interiors, flooding sets, shaking environments, and debris effects were often physically built to increase realism. The decision to release the movie in 3D also influenced production choices. During the early 2010s, many blockbuster films used 3D technology to create more immersive experiences. The filmmakers designed certain sequences specifically to take advantage of 3D visuals, especially scenes involving collapsing buildings, flying debris, giant waves, and aerial rescues. The earthquake scenes themselves required careful choreography. Earthquakes are difficult to portray realistically because they involve unpredictable movement and large-scale destruction happening simultaneously. The filmmakers used a combination of shaking camera techniques, digital simulations, practical effects, and sound design to create the feeling of violent seismic activity. Sound design became especially important during production. Earthquakes in the movie are accompanied by deep rumbling sounds, cracking metal, collapsing concrete, and explosive impacts. These sounds helped make the disasters feel physically overwhelming for audiences. The emotional tone of the film also remained a major focus throughout production. Brad Peyton wanted the audience to care deeply about the characters before the destruction reached its peak. This is why the movie spends time establishing Ray's strained relationship with Emma, Blake's independence, and the family's lingering grief over Mallory's death. The production team understood that emotional investment makes disaster scenes more effective. When audiences care about the characters, every collapsing building and dangerous situation feels more intense. The movie's visual style was designed to emphasize scale. Wide shots often show entire city skylines collapsing, while close-up shots focus on terrified survivors trying to escape. This combination helps audiences understand both the massive destruction and the personal human cost of the disaster. Another major strength of the production was its pacing. The film gradually escalates from smaller tremors to increasingly catastrophic earthquakes and finally to the giant tsunami. This escalation keeps tension building throughout the movie rather than exhausting audiences too early. The collaboration between writers, producers, visual effects teams, actors, and Brad Peyton ultimately shaped San Andreas into a modern disaster blockbuster that balanced emotional storytelling with large-scale spectacle. The long development process demonstrates how much planning goes into creating a major Hollywood disaster film. Multiple writers refined the screenplay over several years, production companies invested heavily in visual effects and action sequences, and the director carefully balanced emotion with destruction. By the time the movie finally reached audiences, San Andreas had evolved far beyond its original concept as a simple earthquake movie. It became a story about survival, family, courage, and emotional healing set against one of the most catastrophic natural disasters ever portrayed on screen. The development and production process reveals how modern blockbuster filmmaking depends on collaboration across many creative departments. Writers shaped the emotional story, producers managed the enormous scale of production, visual effects artists created believable destruction, and actors gave emotional depth to the characters. In the end, the success of San Andreas came from its ability to combine thrilling spectacle with human emotion. The years of script rewrites, production planning, and creative collaboration allowed the film to become more than just a visual effects showcase. It became a disaster movie audiences could emotionally connect with while experiencing some of the most spectacular earthquake sequences ever created in modern cinema. The casting of San Andreas, 2015, played a major role in shaping the film into one of the most successful disaster movies of the decade. While the movie is remembered for its giant earthquakes, collapsing cities, tsunamis, and spectacular visual effects, the emotional power of the story depended heavily on the actors chosen to portray the characters. Disaster films often succeed or fail based on whether audiences emotionally connect with the people trapped inside the catastrophe. The filmmakers behind San Andreas understood this clearly, which is why they carefully assembled a cast capable of balancing emotional drama, large-scale action, suspense, and human vulnerability. The casting process began with the most important role in the film, Raymond "Ray" Gaines, the rescue helicopter pilot who becomes the emotional center of the story. On October 14, 2013, Dwayne Johnson officially signed on to star in the movie. This was a major moment for the production because Johnson's involvement immediately gave the project star power, global recognition, and commercial strength. At the time, Dwayne Johnson had already become one of Hollywood's most recognizable action stars. He was known for combining physical strength, charisma, humor, and emotional sincerity in his performances. The filmmakers needed someone who could convincingly lead a massive disaster film while also portraying a caring father and emotionally damaged husband. Johnson was considered the perfect choice because he could handle both the physical demands of the role and the emotional depth required for the story. Ray Gaines is not simply an action hero fighting enemies. He is a rescue pilot desperately trying to save his family during the collapse of California. His emotional motivation comes from love, grief, guilt, and responsibility. Johnson's casting allowed the character to feel larger than life while still emotionally relatable. One of the most important aspects of Johnson's casting was his natural screen presence. Disaster films require audiences to believe that the lead character can survive impossible situations. Johnson's physicality made scenes involving helicopter rescues, dangerous stunts, collapsing buildings, and underwater survival feel believable within the heightened reality of the movie. However, the filmmakers also understood that physical strength alone would not make audiences care about Ray. The character needed emotional vulnerability, especially because the story revolves around a broken family dealing with grief after the death of Ray's daughter Mallory. Johnson brought emotional sincerity to the role, making Ray feel like a father first and an action hero second. Another reason Johnson was an ideal choice involved his growing popularity worldwide. Disaster movies are expensive productions that rely heavily on international box office success. Johnson's global fanbase helped increase anticipation for the movie long before filming even began. After Johnson joined the project, the filmmakers began building the rest of the cast around him. On February 4, 2014, Alexandra Daddario joined the film to play Blake Gaines, Ray and Emma's daughter. Blake is one of the most important characters in the story because she serves as the emotional bridge connecting her separated parents. Much of the movie revolves around Ray and Emma's desperate attempt to rescue her while California collapses around them. Casting Blake correctly was crucial because the character needed to feel intelligent, capable, emotionally relatable, and strong under pressure. Alexandra Daddario brought all of those qualities to the role. Her performance helped make Blake far more than a typical daughter in danger character often seen in disaster films. The filmmakers wanted Blake to actively participate in survival rather than simply wait for rescue. Daddario portrayed her as resourceful, courageous, and emotionally resilient. During the earthquakes in San Francisco, Blake uses survival skills taught to her by Ray and helps other people escape danger. Daddario also brought emotional warmth to the role. Blake deeply loves both of her parents and quietly hopes they can reconcile despite their separation. Her emotional connection with Ray and Emma gives the movie much of its heart. Another important aspect of Daddario's casting was her chemistry with Johnson and Carla Gugino. The Gaines family needed to feel believable emotionally, especially during scenes involving grief, reconciliation, and survival. Daddario helped create that family dynamic naturally. On March 12, 2014, Carla Gugino joined the cast as Emma Gaines, Ray's estranged wife. Gugino's casting was especially significant because she already had previous on-screen chemistry with Dwayne Johnson. The two actors had worked together before in Race to Witch Mountain and Faster, meaning they already shared familiarity and comfort as performers. This existing chemistry became extremely valuable for San Andreas because Ray and Emma's relationship forms the emotional backbone of the film. Their marriage collapsed after the tragic death of their daughter Mallory, and much of the story explores how the disaster forces them to reconnect emotionally. The filmmakers needed an actress capable of portraying emotional pain, resilience, intelligence, and lingering love all at once. Gugino brought emotional maturity and realism to Emma's character. Rather than portraying her simply as a victim needing rescue, Gugino made Emma strong, compassionate, and capable of surviving alongside Ray. Emma's emotional journey is deeply tied to grief and healing. She begins the film trying to move on with her life alongside her wealthy new boyfriend Daniel Riddick. Yet as the earthquakes unfold, Emma slowly realizes that her emotional bond with Ray never disappeared. Gugino's chemistry with Johnson helped make their reconciliation believable. Their scenes together feel emotionally grounded because both actors portray years of shared history, heartbreak, and unresolved love beneath the surface. Only 2 days later, on March 14, 2014, Art Parkinson joined the cast. Parkinson became known internationally for his role in Game of Thrones, and his casting added youthful emotional energy to the movie. Parkinson played Ollie Taylor, the younger brother of Ben Taylor. Ollie becomes one of Blake's companions during the San Francisco disaster sequences. The character represents innocence and vulnerability amid large-scale destruction. Ollie's role is important because disaster films often need emotional contrast between intense action and human tenderness. Parkinson brought warmth and realism to the character, making Ollie feel like an ordinary young boy caught in unimaginable circumstances. The relationship between Ollie and his older brother Ben also adds emotional depth to the film. Their sibling bond mirrors the family themes running throughout the story. On April 1, 2014, Archie Punjabi joined the film as Serena Johnson, a news reporter covering the earthquake disaster. Punjabi was already respected for her dramatic acting abilities, and her role in San Andreas helped expand the movie's perspective beyond just the Gaines family. Serena represents the role of media during national catastrophe. Through her broadcasts, audiences inside the movie learn about the growing scale of destruction and the scientific warnings being issued by Dr. Lawrence Hayes. The filmmakers needed someone capable of portraying professionalism and determination under pressure. Punjabi gave Serena intelligence, urgency, and emotional seriousness. Even as the world around her collapses, Serena continues reporting to inform the public about the danger. Her presence also helps the audience understand the scientific side of the disaster. By interacting with Dr. Hayes and covering the unfolding events, Serena becomes one of the key voices explaining what is happening across California. On April 5, 2014, Todd Williams joined the cast as Marcus Crowlings, an old Army friend of Ray Gaines. Marcus works alongside Ray in rescue operations and represents the teamwork and loyalty within emergency response crews. Williams brought grounded realism to the role. Marcus is not portrayed as a flashy action hero but as a dependable professional willing to risk his life to help others. His friendship with Ray adds authenticity to the rescue team dynamic. Disaster films often rely heavily on teamwork because survival rarely happens alone. Marcus symbolizes the bravery of first responders during catastrophic emergencies. On April 15, 2014, Colton Haynes joined the cast. Haynes played Joby O'Leary, another member of Ray's rescue helicopter team. Like Marcus, Joby helps establish the dangerous and highly skilled environment of emergency rescue operations. Haynes brought youthful energy and physical intensity to the role. His character participates in risky rescue missions early in the movie, helping audiences understand the professionalism and danger involved in Ray's line of work. These supporting rescue crew members help ground the movie in realism before the larger disaster sequences begin. They remind viewers that Ray is part of a trained team rather than a lone superhero. On April 29, 2014, Ioan Grufford joined the film to play Daniel Riddick, Emma's wealthy boyfriend and a successful real estate developer. Daniel is one of the movie's most important supporting characters because he serves as a direct contrast to Ray Gaines. At first, Daniel appears polished, intelligent, wealthy, and successful. He represents the stable, sophisticated future Emma seems ready to embrace after separating from Ray. However, as the disaster unfolds, Daniel's true personality emerges. The filmmakers needed an actor who could appear charming and confident while also gradually revealing fear and selfishness. Grufford handled this transformation effectively. Daniel is not portrayed as purely evil. Instead, he becomes a realistic example of how panic and self-preservation can expose weakness in people during disasters. Daniel's cowardice becomes fully clear when he abandons Blake during the earthquake in San Francisco. While Ray repeatedly risks his life for others, Daniel chooses to save himself. Grufford's casting was important because he brought enough sophistication and charisma to make Emma's relationship with Daniel believable initially. His eventual failure as a person becomes more impactful because audiences first see him as capable and trustworthy. On May 28, 2014, Woo-Yoon Lee joined the cast as Dr. Kim Park, co-director of the Caltech Seismology Lab alongside Dr. Lawrence Hayes. Although Kim Park's screen time is relatively brief, the character plays a major emotional role in the story. Kim Park dies during the Hoover Dam collapse while saving a little girl from floodwaters. His sacrifice establishes one of the film's core themes, heroism through selflessness. The filmmakers needed an actor capable of making audiences emotionally connect with the character quickly despite limited scenes. Lee brought intelligence, compassion, and quiet heroism to the role. Kim Park's friendship with Dr. Hayes also helps humanize the scientific storyline. Instead of portraying scientists as emotionally detached, the film shows Hayes and Park as deeply committed people trying to save lives through their research. Finally, on June 11, Australian singer and actress Kylie Minogue joined the cast as Susan Riddick, Daniel's sister. Although Susan's role is smaller compared to the main cast, her character helps expand the social world around Daniel and Blake before the disaster fully unfolds. Minogue's casting added additional celebrity recognition to the movie, especially for international audiences. Her performance gives Susan warmth and humanity, helping audiences feel the fear and confusion experienced by ordinary civilians during the earthquakes. The supporting cast overall played an important role in making San Andreas feel emotionally populated. Disaster movies depend not only on visual effects but also on believable human reactions. Every supporting actor contributes to the feeling that an entire society is struggling to survive. One of the most successful aspects of the casting process was how well the actors fit together emotionally. The Gaines family feels believable because Johnson, Gugino, and Daddario create natural chemistry as parents and daughter. Their emotional scenes involving grief, fear, and reconciliation feel genuine despite the exaggerated scale of the disaster surrounding them. The younger cast members, especially Daddario, Johnstonbert, and Parkinson, also help create emotional hope during the film's darker moments. Their teamwork and growing relationships provide warmth amid destruction. Meanwhile, actors like Paul Giamatti, Archie Punjabi, and Woo-Yoon Lee strengthen the scientific and media storylines, giving the disaster broader social and intellectual context. The casting choices also balance star power with emotional authenticity. Johnson brought blockbuster appeal, while experienced dramatic actors like Gugino and Giamatti grounded the story emotionally. In large disaster films, audiences must emotionally care about characters enough to remain invested through non-stop destruction sequences. The cast of San Andreas succeeded because each actor helped create believable emotional stakes beneath the spectacle. Ultimately, the casting process was one of the most important reasons the film worked as both an action blockbuster and an emotional survival story. The earthquakes, tsunamis, and collapsing cities provided excitement, but the performances of the actors gave those disasters human meaning. The carefully assembled cast allowed San Andreas to become more than just a visual effects movie. It became a story about family, courage, grief, survival, and human resilience during one of the most catastrophic disasters ever imagined on screen. The filming and production process of San Andreas, 2015, was an enormous undertaking that reflected the massive scale of the disaster movie itself. Creating a film centered around catastrophic earthquakes, collapsing cities, giant tsunamis, helicopter rescues, and large-scale destruction required years of preparation, extensive location shooting, advanced visual effects planning, and coordination between hundreds of cast and crew members across multiple countries and cities. The production journey reveals how modern blockbuster filmmaking combines practical locations, studio work, stunt coordination, digital technology, and large logistical operations to create believable cinematic spectacle. On December 17, 2013, it was officially reported that San Andreas would be filmed at Village Roadshow Studios in Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. This was a major decision for the production because Australia had become one of the world's most popular destinations for large-scale Hollywood filmmaking. The country offered modern studios, experienced film crews, tax incentives, varied filming environments, and advanced production facilities capable of supporting massive blockbuster projects. Village Roadshow Studios in Gold Coast had already earned an international reputation for handling major productions. The studios featured large sound stages, water tanks, special effects facilities, and technical resources necessary for action-heavy films. For a movie like San Andreas, which required earthquakes, flooding, collapsing structures, helicopters, and large disaster sequences, these facilities were extremely valuable. The filmmakers chose Queensland because it could convincingly recreate parts of California while also providing controlled production environments. Gold Coast and Brisbane offered urban areas, roads, buildings, and landscapes flexible enough to stand in for sections of Los Angeles and San Francisco during certain scenes. The production was scheduled to begin in April 2014. Preparations involved transforming parts of Queensland into disaster zones that would later appear on screen as devastated American cities. Locations included Ipswich, suburban areas across the Gold Coast, and Brisbane. Each location served different purposes depending on the scenes being filmed. The choice of multiple filming locations allowed the production designers and directors to create visual variety throughout the movie. Some areas were used for calmer emotional scenes, while others were transformed into chaotic earthquake-damaged environments filled with debris, destroyed vehicles, broken roads, smoke effects, and emergency response activity. Disaster films require an enormous amount of physical preparation because destruction scenes cannot rely entirely on computer-generated imagery. Practical sets and physical effects help actors react naturally and make the disasters feel more believable. This meant entire streets had to be redesigned to look partially destroyed before filming even began. On March 20, 2014, it was announced that another major production, Gods of Egypt, had started filming in Australia and that San Andreas would begin shortly afterward. This reflected how Australia had become a major centre for international filmmaking during that period. Multiple Hollywood productions often operated simultaneously in Queensland because of its growing film industry infrastructure. Before filming officially started, actors underwent extensive physical and technical training. On April 16, 2014, Dwayne Johnson shared photographs from his training sessions for the movie. These training sessions were essential because Johnson's character, Ray Gaines, is a highly skilled rescue helicopter pilot who performs dangerous rescue operations throughout the story. Johnson needed to physically prepare for demanding action sequences involving climbing, parachuting, helicopter rescues, underwater scenes, and survival situations. Although stunt professionals handled the most dangerous moments, Johnson still needed to convincingly portray a professional rescue worker. The training also helped Johnson understand how rescue crews operate during emergency situations. Realistic body movements, equipment handling, and rescue procedures were important for making Ray Gaines feel authentic. Audiences needed to believe that he truly belonged in dangerous rescue environments. Physical preparation became one of the most important aspects of production because San Andreas was not a superhero movie. Even though the action scenes were exaggerated for entertainment, the filmmakers wanted the human reactions and rescue work to feel grounded and realistic. Filming officially began on April 22, 2014, in Australia. From the beginning, the production faced the enormous challenge of recreating large-scale disasters safely and convincingly. The movie combined practical effects, location filming, stunt work, miniatures, and digital effects to create the illusion of California collapsing under giant earthquakes. One of the interesting aspects of the production was how it moved between Australia and real American locations. While many scenes were filmed in Queensland, the filmmakers also shot important sequences in Los Angeles, Bakersfield, and San Francisco to give the movie authenticity. Using real locations helped ground the story visually. Audiences recognize iconic California landmarks such as the Golden Gate Bridge, Fisherman's Wharf, Lombard Street, and AT&T Park. Filming in these actual locations made the destruction sequences feel more immersive because viewers could recognize the real environments being devastated by earthquakes and tsunamis. On May 12, filming took place in the Lockyer Valley area of Queensland. This region offered landscapes useful for road travel scenes and disaster environments. Large disaster movies often require locations where filmmakers can safely stage vehicle crashes, helicopter landings, road destruction, and action sequences involving large equipment. The Lockyer Valley provided open spaces suitable for filming scenes involving emergency travel through damaged regions. Parts of the movie showing highways breaking apart and characters navigating dangerous landscapes were supported by such environments. During May the 10th and 11th, production also took place in Los Angeles before returning to Australia. These brief location shoots were likely focused on capturing exterior shots, city footage, and recognizable California visuals necessary for realism. Disaster movies often combine footage from multiple countries and locations seamlessly. Through editing and visual effects, streets in Australia can appear connected to actual California skylines. This blending of locations is one of the key techniques used in blockbuster filmmaking. On May 17, a second unit crew filmed scenes in Bakersfield while Dwayne Johnson continued working in Gold Coast. Large productions frequently use multiple film units simultaneously to save time and increase efficiency. The first unit usually handles scenes involving main actors and major dramatic moments, while the second unit focuses on action shots, environmental footage, vehicles, aerial scenes, and establishing shots. In San Andreas, the second unit played an extremely important role because the movie contained so many large-scale destruction sequences. The Bakersfield scenes involved helicopter footage and travel sequences connected to Ray and Emma's journey through collapsing California. Helicopters became a major visual symbol throughout the movie because Ray's profession as a rescue pilot placed him constantly above the destruction, giving audiences dramatic aerial views of devastated cities and landscapes. Meanwhile, Dwayne Johnson's continued filming in Gold Coast showed how carefully the production schedule had to be managed. Blockbuster productions involving major stars require detailed coordination because actors often move between action scenes, studio shoots, and location filming in rapid succession. On June 22, the production crew was seen filming disaster scenes on Elizabeth Street in Brisbane. This was one of the clearest examples of how Australian city streets were transformed into earthquake-ravaged environments. Creating these disaster scenes involved extensive production design work. Streets had to be covered with fake rubble, broken glass, damaged vehicles, smoke machines, emergency lighting, and debris. Buildings were redesigned to appear cracked or partially collapsed. The filmmakers wanted audiences to feel immersed inside an active disaster zone rather than simply watching destruction from a distance. This required practical visual detail everywhere in the frame. Actors and extras also played an important role during these scenes. Hundreds of background performers were used to portray panicked civilians, injured survivors, emergency workers, and fleeing crowds. Their reactions helped make the disaster feel massive and realistic. The soundstage work at Village Roadshow Studios was equally important. Many interior destruction scenes were filmed inside controlled studio environments where shaking sets, collapsing walls, water flooding systems, and practical effects could be safely managed. For example, scenes involving collapsing buildings, flooding interiors, and dangerous rescue sequences often required specially designed sets capable of physically moving or breaking apart during filming. One of the most technically difficult aspects of production involved the earthquake effects themselves. Earthquakes are invisible forces, meaning filmmakers had to create the illusion of violent seismic activity through environmental movement, sound design, camera techniques, and actor performances. Special rigs were used to shake sets and simulate violent ground movement. Actors often performed while floors tilted, objects crashed around them, and structures appeared unstable. These practical effects helped reactions feel authentic. At the same time, visual effects teams worked alongside the production crew to plan digital destruction that would later be added in post-production. The filmmakers carefully mapped out how buildings, bridges, roads, and entire city blocks would collapse during the earthquakes. The production eventually moved heavily into San Francisco during July 2014. On July 8, the second unit began filming there, while the first unit arrived later on July 21. Filming in San Francisco became especially important because the city serves as the emotional and visual climax of the movie. The San Francisco sequences include some of the film's largest disasters, including the giant earthquake, the tsunami, and the destruction of famous landmarks. Filming in the actual city helped capture authentic details and recognizable locations. On July the 15th and 16th, filming took place at Fisherman's Wharf and the Embarcadero. These waterfront locations later became central to the tsunami sequences. The filmmakers wanted audiences to immediately recognize these famous areas before watching them become flooded and destroyed. On July 21st, production moved to AT&T Park during a real San Francisco Giants baseball game. This was one of the movie's most ambitious location shoots because filming during an actual sporting event required careful coordination with stadium officials, crowds, and live event schedules. Using a real baseball game added realism and scale to the disaster scenes. It showed ordinary life continuing normally before catastrophe suddenly strikes. On July 22nd, the production filmed earthquake scenes at Hyde and Lombard Streets on Russian Hill. These locations are among San Francisco's most famous streets, known for steep hills and unique city views. The crew filled these areas with fake victims, debris, and garbage to simulate earthquake destruction. Emergency vehicles, damaged cars, and practical effects helped transform the streets into disaster zones. Filming disaster scenes in public city environments is extremely challenging because productions must coordinate traffic control, public safety, visual continuity, and crowd management. Large sections of streets often need temporary redesigns to appear damaged. On July 23rd, filming took place inside the Armory, another major San Francisco location. Interior disaster scenes often required large controlled environments where filmmakers could stage collapses, flooding, explosions, and rescue sequences safely. By July 26th, the production was filming near the Fairmont Hotel and throughout California Street in the financial district. These locations provided dramatic urban environments for the final disaster sequences. The financial district scenes were especially important because they represented the collapse of San Francisco's modern skyline. Through a combination of practical filming and later visual effects, these areas would eventually appear devastated by earthquakes and tsunamis. Filming officially wrapped on July 27, 2014. Although principal photography ended, the production process was far from over. Disaster movies rely heavily on post-production work, especially visual effects editing, sound design, digital destruction, color grading, and compositing. Visual effects artists spent months creating collapsing buildings, giant waves, fissures splitting roads, and destroyed cityscapes. The filmmakers aimed to blend practical footage with digital effects seamlessly so audiences would believe the disasters were physically happening. Sound design also became a major focus after filming wrapped. Earthquake sounds, collapsing concrete, exploding glass, roaring tsunami waves, helicopter blades, emergency sirens, and collapsing bridges all needed careful layering to create an immersive experience. The production of San Andreas ultimately demonstrated how modern blockbuster filmmaking combines global locations, practical effects, studio work, advanced technology, and massive logistical coordination. Every filming location contributed something important to the final movie. Australia provided controlled production environments and large studio facilities, while California locations gave the film authenticity and recognizable landmarks. The production also highlighted the enormous complexity behind disaster films. Creating believable destruction on such a massive scale required coordination between directors, actors, stunt teams, visual effects artists, production designers, engineers, and location crews. In the end, the filming process allowed San Andreas to achieve its goal of immersing audiences inside one of the largest cinematic natural disasters ever created. The combination of real-world locations, practical effects, emotional performances, and advanced visual technology helped transform the movie into a thrilling and visually spectacular disaster epic. The visual effects and music of San Andreas, 2015, were two of the most important elements responsible for transforming the film into a large-scale cinematic disaster experience. While the story focused on earthquakes destroying California and a family struggling to survive, it was the combination of groundbreaking visual effects, realistic destruction sequences, immersive sound design, and emotional musical composition that gave the movie its powerful atmosphere. Together, these technical and artistic elements helped audiences feel the terror, chaos, scale, and emotional intensity of the disaster unfolding on screen. Because San Andreas was a disaster film centered around catastrophic earthquakes, giant tsunamis, collapsing cities, and large-scale destruction, visual effects became the backbone of the entire production. Nearly every major action scene in the movie required some level of digital enhancement or computer-generated imagery. The filmmakers wanted audiences to believe they were witnessing one of the most devastating natural disasters ever portrayed in modern cinema. Creating this illusion required the collaboration of several major visual effects companies, including Hydraulx, Cinesite, Image Engine, Scanline VFX, and Method Studios. These studios worked together under the supervision of Greg Strauss, Colin Strauss, Holger Voss, and Martin Kulpit. Each company specialized in different aspects of visual effects production, contributing unique technical strengths to the movie. The scale of the visual effects work was enormous because the film did not simply feature isolated moments of destruction. Entire cities had to be digitally recreated and then destroyed in realistic ways. Roads cracked apart, skyscrapers collapsed, bridges shattered, dams exploded, tsunamis flooded urban areas, and landscapes permanently changed shape. The challenge for the visual effects artists was to make all of this destruction feel believable and emotionally immersive rather than artificial or cartoonish. One of the most difficult aspects of the visual effects work involved simulating earthquakes themselves. Unlike monsters, explosions, or visible enemies, earthquakes are invisible forces. Audiences cannot directly see seismic energy moving underground. This meant the visual effects teams had to communicate the power of earthquakes through environmental reactions. Buildings shaking violently, roads splitting apart, collapsing bridges, falling debris, and clouds of dust all had to work together to create the feeling of seismic chaos. Every movement needed to feel physically convincing because audiences instinctively recognize when destruction looks unrealistic. The filmmakers also wanted the disasters to escalate gradually throughout the movie. Early tremors needed to feel dangerous but manageable, while later earthquakes had to appear apocalyptic in scale. The visual effects teams carefully designed this progression so that each new disaster sequence felt larger and more terrifying than the previous one. The Hoover Dam sequence early in the movie became one of the first major showcases of the film's visual effects capabilities. In this scene, a previously unknown fault line triggers a massive earthquake that destroys the dam. The collapse required a complex combination of digital water simulations, cracking concrete effects, debris animation, and environmental destruction. Creating realistic water effects became especially important because enormous amounts of water burst through the collapsing structure. The visual effects artists needed the water to feel heavy, violent, and unstoppable. This sequence established the tone for the rest of the film by showing audiences that no structure, regardless of size or engineering strength, was safe from nature's power. Another major challenge involved recreating famous California landmarks digitally. Audiences around the world instantly recognize locations like the Golden Gate Bridge, San Francisco's skyline, AT&T Park, and Los Angeles skyscrapers. The visual effects teams had to recreate these locations in detailed digital form before they could realistically destroy them. The destruction of Los Angeles during the MW 9.1 earthquake became one of the film's most ambitious sequences. Entire skyscrapers collapse while streets split open beneath panicked civilians. Helicopters fly through collapsing urban environments while fires spread across the city. To achieve this, visual effects artists created highly detailed digital city models. These models allowed buildings to break apart realistically under simulated seismic stress. Instead of simply exploding structures randomly, the artists studied how real buildings respond during earthquakes. Glass shattered outward, steel beams twisted, concrete fractured, and debris fell according to simulated physics. Dust simulations also became extremely important. Earthquake destruction creates enormous clouds of dust and debris that fill the air and reduce visibility. These dust effects helped make the disaster scenes feel chaotic and overwhelming. Hydraulx played a major role in coordinating many of these large-scale destruction effects. Greg and Colin Strauss, who supervised the visual effects, were already known for their expertise in action-heavy and visually complex films. Their experience helped ensure that the destruction remained visually coherent even during the movie's most chaotic moments. One of the film's greatest visual achievements was the San Francisco earthquake and tsunami climax. The MW 9.6 earthquake sequence required entire sections of the city to collapse simultaneously. Roads cracked open, skyscrapers fell into the bay, fires spread across neighborhoods, and famous landmarks crumbled. The visual effects teams had to maintain a careful balance between realism and cinematic spectacle. Real earthquakes are terrifying but often visually chaotic in unpredictable ways. The filmmakers wanted destruction that looked believable while still remaining visually clear enough for audiences to follow the characters. This required detailed planning between the director, cinematographers, production designers, and visual effects artists. Every major destruction sequence was carefully storyboarded long before filming began. Scanline VFX became especially important during the tsunami sequence. Scanline was internationally respected for its advanced water simulation technology, and the giant tsunami wave in San Andreas became one of the film's most technically impressive achievements. Water is one of the most difficult elements to create realistically in computer graphics because it behaves unpredictably and interacts dynamically with environments. The tsunami sequence required enormous digital water simulations capable of flooding entire city districts, carrying ships through urban areas, and smashing into buildings with terrifying force. The filmmakers wanted the tsunami to feel like a living wall of destruction. As the wave enters San Francisco Bay, it lifts massive ships, destroys structures, and overwhelms everything in its path. The visual effects teams carefully simulated wave behavior, water spray, floating debris, and environmental flooding to create the illusion of unstoppable force. One of the most memorable visual moments occurs when a gigantic container ship is swept into the Golden Gate Bridge by the tsunami. The collision destroys the bridge's center span in spectacular fashion. This sequence required combining digital water effects, large-scale structural destruction, ship animation, and debris simulations into one coherent visual event. The destruction of the Golden Gate Bridge carried symbolic importance within the film. The bridge is one of America's most recognizable landmarks, representing connection, stability, and modern engineering. Watching it collapse emphasizes the overwhelming scale of the disaster. Image Engine and Method Studios also contributed heavily to environmental destruction and digital compositing throughout the film. Compositing involves blending practical footage, actors, digital environments, and computer-generated effects into seamless final shots. Many scenes in San Andreas combined real actors filmed on practical sets with fully digital environments added later. For example, actors performing inside partially built sets would later appear surrounded by collapsing skyscrapers, giant waves, or destroyed cityscapes. The visual effects teams also worked closely with the film's cinematographers to maintain realistic lighting and environmental consistency. Digital destruction had to match the lighting conditions of the original footage perfectly, otherwise, the illusion would break. Another important aspect of the visual effects involved aerial sequences. Since Ray Gaines is a rescue helicopter pilot, many scenes occur high above collapsing cities. Helicopter shots provided audiences with sweeping views of the devastation while also increasing the sense of scale. These aerial scenes required complex digital environments because helicopters were often filmed against green screens or controlled backgrounds before being placed into digitally destroyed cities during post-production. The visual effects artists also had to carefully manage pacing. If every scene contained non-stop destruction, audiences might become emotionally numb. Instead, the movie alternates between quieter emotional moments and massive disaster sequences, allowing the visual effects to maintain impact throughout the film. Sound design worked closely alongside the visual effects to make the disasters feel physically overwhelming. Earthquakes were accompanied by deep rumbling vibrations, cracking steel, collapsing concrete, screaming civilians, and exploding infrastructure. The combination of visuals and sound helped create sensory immersion. Audiences were not simply watching buildings fall, they were experiencing the terrifying chaos alongside the characters. While the visual effects created the physical destruction of San Andreas, the music composed by Andrew Lockington gave the movie its emotional heartbeat. On July 24, 2014, it was officially announced that Andrew Lockington would compose the score for the film. Lockington was already known for creating emotionally powerful orchestral music for large-scale films, making him an excellent choice for a disaster movie that balanced action with family drama. The score in San Andreas serves several important purposes throughout the movie. First, it increases tension during disaster scenes. Second, it emphasizes emotional relationships between the characters. Third, it creates a sense of scale and urgency that supports the visual spectacle. Lockington's music blends powerful orchestral themes with emotional melodies and suspenseful rhythms. During earthquake scenes, the score becomes intense and aggressive, filled with heavy percussion, rising strings, and dramatic brass instruments. This music amplifies the feeling of danger and chaos. However, the soundtrack is not only focused on destruction. Some of the film's most emotional moments involve quieter musical themes centered around family, grief, and hope. The relationship between Ray, Emma, and Blake is supported heavily by the score. Emotional scenes involving their fractured family often feature softer orchestral melodies that highlight sadness, love, and reconciliation. One of the most important emotional themes in the movie involves the memory of Mallory, Ray, and Emma's deceased daughter. The music surrounding these moments carries deep emotional weight, reminding audiences of the grief haunting the Gaines family. During the film's climax, when Ray desperately tries to save Blake from drowning, the music becomes especially important. The score builds emotional tension while also reflecting Ray's fear of reliving the tragedy of losing another daughter. Lockington's ability to shift between large-scale action music and intimate emotional themes helped the movie avoid becoming emotionally empty despite its massive destruction sequences. The promotional campaign for San Andreas also used music very effectively. 3 teaser trailers were released for the movie, and 2 of them featured Robot Corps, Delia de France, and Sia performing a haunting version of California Dre Armin, originally made famous by the Mamas and the Papas. This song choice became one of the most memorable aspects of the film's marketing. California Dre Armin traditionally evokes images of California's beauty, culture, freedom, and idealism. By using a darker, slower, more emotional version of the song during footage of earthquakes destroying California, the trailers created a powerful emotional contrast. The song transformed from something nostalgic and comforting into something haunting and tragic. Audiences watched iconic California landscapes collapse while hearing lyrics associated with dreams and longing. This contrast helped establish the tone of the movie before audiences even entered theaters. The trailers suggested that San Andreas would not only be visually spectacular but also emotionally dramatic and intense. Sia's emotional vocal style added additional emotional weight to the music. Her voice carried sadness and vulnerability that matched the imagery of collapsing cities and terrified survivors. The trailers became highly effective because they combined recognizable music, emotional atmosphere, and shocking visuals into a memorable promotional experience. Many viewers specifically remembered the California Dre Armin version long after seeing the trailers. The combination of visual effects and music ultimately became one of the defining strengths of San Andreas. The visual effects created breathtaking large-scale destruction, while the music gave emotional meaning to the chaos. Together, they allowed audiences to feel both the terror of nature's power and the emotional resilience of the characters struggling to survive. Without strong visual effects, the earthquakes and tsunamis would not have felt believable. Without emotional music, the destruction might have felt empty and mechanical. The balance between spectacle and emotion is what allowed San Andreas to succeed as both a disaster blockbuster and a human survival story. The film's technical achievements demonstrated how modern blockbuster filmmaking depends on collaboration between artists, composers, designers, programmers, editors, and visual effects specialists. Every collapsing building, every crashing wave, every emotional musical cue, and every moment of destruction required careful planning and artistic coordination. In the end, the visual effects and music helped transform San Andreas into an immersive cinematic experience that audiences could both emotionally feel and visually believe. The release and home media journey of San Andreas, 2015, played a major role in transforming the film from a theatrical disaster blockbuster into a widely recognized modern action spectacle that continued reaching audiences long after its cinema run ended. The movie's release strategy, advanced presentation formats, marketing timing, and later success on Blu-ray, DVD, and digital platforms demonstrated how Hollywood blockbusters are carefully positioned not only for box office success but also for long-term popularity in home entertainment markets. By the time San Andreas approached release in 2015, anticipation for the film had already grown significantly. The combination of Dwayne Johnson's star power, massive earthquake destruction sequences, emotional family drama, and groundbreaking visual effects had generated strong public interest. Warner Bros. Pictures understood that the movie had the potential to become one of the biggest disaster films of the decade, and the release strategy reflected the studio's confidence in the project. The official world premiere of San Andreas took place on May 26, 2015, at the famous Dolby Theatre in Hollywood, Los Angeles. This location was highly symbolic because the Dolby Theatre is one of the most prestigious venues in the American entertainment industry. Known globally as the home of the Academy Awards ceremony, the theater represents Hollywood glamour, cinematic achievement, and major film events. Holding the premiere there immediately signaled that San Andreas was being treated as a major blockbuster release rather than a smaller action movie. Disaster films depend heavily on spectacle, audience excitement, and large public attention, so the premiere itself became part of the movie's promotional campaign. The atmosphere surrounding the premiere reflected the scale of the production. Cast members, filmmakers, producers, journalists, photographers, and invited guests attended the event, turning it into a major Hollywood celebration. Red carpet premieres serve several purposes for blockbuster films. They generate media coverage, increase public excitement, create celebrity visibility, and reinforce the idea that the film is a major cinematic event audiences should experience in theaters. For San Andreas, the premiere was especially important because disaster movies are designed to be experienced on large cinema screens with immersive sound systems. The filmmakers wanted audiences to feel the earthquakes, collapsing buildings, and tsunami waves as intensely as possible. Premiering at a prestigious venue helped emphasize the film's large-scale cinematic identity. The timing of the release also played a critical role in the movie's success. Initially, San Andreas was scheduled for release on June 5, 2015, in both 2D and 3D formats. Summer is traditionally one of the most competitive and profitable seasons for Hollywood blockbusters because schools are on vacation, audiences seek large entertainment experiences, and studios compete to dominate the global box office. However, Warner Bros. Later moved the release date forward by 1 week. This decision may seem minor, but release date changes are often strategic moves carefully planned by studios. Adjusting a release date can help a film avoid competition from rival movies, take advantage of audience trends, or create stronger momentum at the box office. By releasing San Andreas earlier, Warner Bros. Likely aimed to give the movie a stronger opening window before other major summer releases arrived. Timing is especially important for expensive blockbusters because the first few weeks of release often determine overall financial success. The release in both 2D and 3D formats reflected the continuing popularity of 3D cinema during the mid-2010s. At that time, many large action and disaster films used 3D technology to create more immersive theatrical experiences. San Andreas was particularly well suited for 3D presentation because of its massive destruction sequences. Scenes involving collapsing skyscrapers, flying debris, giant waves, helicopter rescues, and splitting roads benefited from the illusion of depth provided by 3D technology. The filmmakers designed many visual moments specifically to make audiences feel physically surrounded by the disaster. The use of 3D also aligned with one of the movie's main goals, immersion. Disaster films are most effective when audiences feel emotionally and physically involved in the chaos unfolding on screen. The earthquakes in San Andreas were not meant to feel distant or abstract. The filmmakers wanted viewers to feel as though they were trapped inside collapsing cities alongside the characters. One of the most historically important aspects of the film's release was its presentation in Dolby Vision. San Andreas became the first Warner Bros. Pictures film to adopt the Dolby Vision format. This was a major technological milestone for the studio and represented the growing importance of advanced cinematic presentation technologies in modern filmmaking. Dolby Vision enhanced the movie's visual quality through improved brightness, color contrast, and image detail. For a visually intense disaster film like San Andreas, this technology significantly improved the theatrical experience. The earthquakes, fires, collapsing buildings, and tsunami sequences contained enormous amounts of visual detail. Dolby Vision allowed audiences to see deeper shadows, brighter highlights, richer colors, and more realistic environmental effects. For example, scenes involving smoke-filled streets, glowing fires, collapsing skylines, and dark floodwaters became more visually striking through the enhanced presentation. The increased dynamic range also helped make destruction scenes feel more realistic and cinematic. Warner Brothers' decision to use Dolby Vision demonstrated the studio's confidence in the movie as a showcase for advanced visual technology. Since San Andreas depended heavily on visual effects and large-scale spectacle, presenting it in the highest possible quality became part of its marketing identity. The release strategy also reflected the broader evolution of blockbuster cinema during the 2010s. Modern action films increasingly relied on premium formats such as IMAX, Dolby Vision, 3D, and high-end surround sound systems to attract audiences away from home viewing and into theaters. The filmmakers behind San Andreas clearly understood that the movie's strength lay in spectacle. Watching cities collapse on a giant screen with immersive sound and enhanced visuals created a much more intense experience than watching on smaller screens. The theatrical release also benefited greatly from the popularity of Dwayne Johnson. By 2015, Johnson had become one of the world's most bankable action stars. His presence in the marketing campaign helped attract global audiences who associated him with large-scale entertainment, charisma, humor, and physical action. Trailers and promotional material heavily emphasized Johnson's role as Ray Gaines, the rescue pilot fighting to save his family during catastrophic earthquakes. The marketing balanced emotional family drama with massive destruction, helping the movie appeal to both action fans and general audiences. Another important factor in the movie's theatrical success was the universal nature of disaster stories. Earthquakes, floods, and survival themes resonate internationally because natural disasters are fears shared by people worldwide. Unlike movies dependent on complicated cultural references, San Andreas communicated through visual spectacle and emotional survival themes easily understood across global markets. The